That's it, the little blue bar to say we're live. Good evening, everybody. Today is the 11th of May, 2018, Friday, the 11th of May. We have joining us in a little bit, Mr. or Jon The Morgile. So he's going to join us in a little bit. So that's great. And then right now on the panel, we have Patricia from the UK. You know Astral, the Englishman that lives in Denmark. And we have Tommy Rodgers. So welcome, everybody.
All right, Tommy, nice to have you back again, brother.
Thanks, brother.
Hi, everyone.
And Karen.
Hello. Well, what subject are we going to talk about today then, guys?
Your call.
I think it was already decided before we came on, really. It's about
I thought
giants.
we could talk about dwarfs, actually.
Midgets.
Yeah, we need to be PC, so we shouldn't say that. No, I'm talking about giants.
I thought it was about female mud wrestlers. Midgets.
Giants. So, where would you like to start then?
Good question. What about, well, because it's Tommy's more or less Tommy in, I mean, we're all here together, chat room as well. Anyone's got any questions, make sure you fire away and we'll try and answer.
Giants are everywhere. They're everywhere, right? The giants have been around for forever, right? They're in England, they're in Europe, they're in Asia, they're in Egypt, they're in Africa, they're all over North America, they're in South America. Some people even claim they're even alive today, and they live in subterranean catacombs and subterranean civilizations that live below our feet. And I think they might be right in a few notes on that, right? I was really interested in Brian Forster's take on the giants and his great presentation that he did the other day on Sun and Moon. And the information is there if you look for it. You just have to basically get up off your butt and stop being a TV watcher and do some looking around you, because the giants go back a long ways, even the Titans. And if you understand anything about Dictionary of Truth and Mudfossil University, and that's Roger Spur, and then even J. Dreamer Z with the Titans and stuff. And then it gets biblical. It gets extra biblical. I kind of like I like a lot of the information that comes out of the Bible, but there's extra books in the Bible that are not included. And I got information that there's close to 200 books in the Bible, but they only allowed the traditional 66 in the King James Version, which the Ethiopian Bible actually has 80. And the book of Enoch is even in the Ethiopian Bible. It's all there. I got 5 copies of the book of Enoch, right? Hang on a second here, guys. The book of Enoch talks about like this book of Enoch. This is my best one, right? But I got 5 of them anyway, and it tells you about the creation of mankind, or the actual, not the creation of mankind, but how the descendants of the giants kind of messed around with everything, right? Enoch. Anyway, I got lots of books here. It's all there. It's in the Bible too. It's to me, it's a fascinating subject, because there's people on this this plane that we live on that are actually descendants of the giants, and they're actually in charge of a lot of key positions in our political structure, financial structures, and things like this today. There's like people like Oprah Winfrey. She has 6 toes. There's Halle Berry, the Catwoman. She's got 6 toes as well. There's a lot of people in our communities that are walking around with 6 fingers and 6 toes that we don't notice on a regular basis, right? And these are people that are descendants of the 6-fingered, 6-toed giants. And ironically, these people seem to be in powers of financial influence, political influence. They always seem to be one step ahead of the game on your average Joe. And see, Gary Wayne is a really good man. He's a Canadian. He's an author. He lives in British Columbia, Canada. He's been a biblical scholar for about 30 years. He wrote this book called Genesis 6 Conspiracy, right? Which is it's an 800-page book on everything that's going on. It tells you about all the family bloodlines, everything back. Genesis 6 is chapter 6 in Genesis. Genesis 6 is when the fallen angels from heaven decided to come down and procreate with the women of mankind because they thought they were kind of sexy looking and they had away with them. And out of that procreation, we had a genetic mismatch, and out of that came these giants. And this is where they're everywhere nowadays. We have a biblical flood to rid the world of these creatures. And it just goes on. There's so much information about them. And this is more stuff that's been suppressed by the typical Roman Catholic Church, aka the Jesuit order. And they basically are the strong arm for the church, and they basically hear everything in control. They use places like the Smithsonian Institute to hide these artifacts and these ancient discoveries that are made. And they've even been known to dispose of some of these findings, especially with regards to giants. And I can't confirm it because I wasn't there myself, but apparently they've been taking these bodies of giants out to the sea and just tossing them in the ocean. And some of them are even just being destroyed. And this gets into the recreation of history because the Roman Catholic Church has been recreating history over and over again for forever. And so, I mean, even recently it was Pope Francis, didn't he just change the wording to the Lord's Prayer? I mean, this gets crazy, but there's a lot to it. I've got a lot of information about giants. The giants are everywhere. They got big heads. They can be anywhere from 9, 10, 12 feet, 16, 18, 20, 30 feet tall, 40 feet tall. And then you start looking in towards the Titan aspect of things when the Titans gets back into these creatures are actually in heights of 450 feet in height, sometimes even taller. It gets back into the old Greek tales of the Clash of the Titans. Most of your mythology and your old lore is there's a lot more truth to it than it's made out to be, like a comic book series of some guy's fancy imagination. There's a lot of truth to a lot of these mythologies and stuff. And
can I just say
the evidence is there. Pardon me?
Can I just say something?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, this you say there's a lot of truth in old stories and folklore and what have you. Well, and the first thing that came to my head there was that fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll crush his bones to make my bread, or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's about giant.
Yeah, it's about giants.
These are little nursery rhymes we heard when we were kids. Jack and the Beanstalk, another one. Yeah, man. Sorry, I was interrupting you there. Rude of me, but carry on, please.
Yeah, these guys here, right? But the giants, your DNA has a sound frequency, right? And this is where they can actually smell you out in a woodpile, right? These creatures have extrasensory perception. They don't really use their mouth to speak. They use their pineal glands per se. They they can. It's really strange because I don't know any. I'm just telling you stuff that I've read about, right? And some people have claimed they have seen them. I'm more interested in things like the Hologeum in Malta, right? Where this is where it gets really weird because as soon as my Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, became Prime Minister, the first stop he made was to meet the Queen of England in Malta. Now, Malta is one of the biggest giant centers, I guess. It's been known for forever as one of these centers of the advanced technology. The Hologeum in Malta is incredible. Two teachers and 30 students went for a walk in the Hologeum, and they prior to them going on the walk, the two teachers had been in there before, and at the end of the Hologeum, they claimed to have seen a series of giants, and they kind of got spooked and they left. And then apparently came back with this 30 students, and it took this 30 students down into this cavern at the end of the Hologeum there. And these 30 students and the two teachers never came back. So they closed off that entrance to the Hologeum at that point. And that was just a couple of years ago. Well, not probably a while back, but, recently. And giants eat people, right?
How many teachers there? Sorry, Tommy.
Pardon me?
How many teachers did you say?
2 teachers and 30 students, I think it was.
All right. So, okay. Sorry. I didn't hear
Right?
you. Yeah.
They went down into the Hologeum and never came out.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But I heard something similar about there was a couple of students that were on a tour down there, and they were looking around, and they came to these like catacombs or whatever, and there was a guard who kind of knew something about these catacombs. They were off limits, but he said to them apparently something about, well, if you dare to go in there, off you go in, and if you dare, and he didn't, but they did. And they said something about they could see these giant, like figures in the background that were almost like deathly or something, I mean.
Yeah.
Some good stories, man.
Even in New Mexico, I guess it was like the mid 18th century, they got 12 giants. The Apache Indians, I believe it was Apache, they got, I think it was 12 giants. They basically cornered them into a cave because they were eating all the natives that were in the tribe. And they were trying to make a deal with these things, saying, look, stop eating our tribe. And they wouldn't. So they eventually rounded these things up and they cornered them into a cave. And then and then they set the front of the cave on fire, and they basically smoked them into the cave, and they killed them. And then over a course of several years, bat guano had developed over top of these giants that had been kind of cooked in the cave. And then recently they just unearthed them. And then once again, the Smithsonian Institute swept in there and took away all the bodies. And but these guys were 12 and 15 footers too, right? So, but if you don't have the physical evidence, and the Smithsonian and the places like the Jesuits and the Roman Catholic Church keeps hiding all the truths, it's hard. And so all you got to do is, kind of go with what you can. I kind of look at the Bible as a way to confirm certain aspects of history. I know it's been kind of tampered with, and as they say that the King James Bible was written by 5 corporations, is that and the other thing. But I mean, I take the good out of it. I leave it's the stupidness behind. And I also got to look at the extra biblical texts that weren't included in the Bible, like the books of Enoch, the book of Jubilees, the book of Jasher, things like this. These are books that they don't allow it in the 66 books in the Roman Catholic King James canon, right? And I like that number 66 comes up again, right? So I mean, but they're real, and I got the books. That's just what I do, is I just keep reading this stuff. I want to know. I'm more concerned about what's going on under my feet on a good day than what's going on above my head, because I know what's going on above my head is nothing but chemtrails, and these guys are blocking out my sun and trying to reduce my ability to link up with any good light. There's I think I'm really interested in what's going on below our feet and what's actually in these oceans, right? You know, because we haven't even researched the oceans, and we don't even know it's underneath the ground. I know it's hollow chambered out, right? And like even Brian said, was it the other day, that there's a tunnel that basically goes from the Great Pyramid up into Bosnia, right? And then I got information there's one that actually goes from England all the way over to Germany, right? These are tunnels, right? And so what's
Are
going
they
on
big
underneath
tunnels?
what's going on underneath our feet?
Tommy, are they tall tunnels or little tunnels?
No, they're tall tunnels, and I believe there would be a lot of
Because
them
I'm
are
just
the
putting
existing
pictures of the.
root
I'm
systems.
just putting Tommy. I'm just putting pictures of the giants on the screen right now.
Yeah. Well, these giants, they're not a clean animal. They're filthy, dirty, and they smell like your worst nightmare you could ever come across, from what I understand. And not just like from one source. I've heard from several sources that these things, they don't have the ability to be bathed or anything like that. They just they're carnivorous, and they're just like they're. I think I was telling you about the ligar, right? It's the cross between a lion and a tiger, and the ligar is an animal that just keeps eating and eating and eating. I think the thing's up to 12 or 1,400 pounds now, and I think its first meal was like 21 pounds of meat, and then about 6 months later, it was eating like 1,200 pounds of meat a day or something stupid like that. And now this thing is, it doesn't have an off switch. It just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. But there's this growing and growing and growing. It also needs to keep eating and eating and eating. And this gets into the Bible, because even the Bible says these Nephilim fallen ones were eating everybody in sight, right? And this gets into where with the cause of the Great Flood and stuff as well, right? But I don't know, this Great Flood thing, I do like to follow Martin Leakey, because I think there's been all kinds of weird mud floods and crazy things like this going on. So, I mean, I know the history books have been tampered with, right? So, I mean, I'm looking at like Anatoly Fomenkov, and he's got 1,000 years missing in our timeline. And I know the Roman Catholic Church has been playing around with the Gregorian calendar, and you know, to the Jews, this year is like 5778 or something, and to us it's 2018. And to the Hebrew faith, they follow the moon calendar, and we got stuck on some Gregorian Roman Catholic 2018 sun calendar, right? And so it's crazy, because if these things are even still alive today and they're roaming around underneath our feet, right? And I got information that there's 1 million children that go missing between England, Canada, and the United States every year, right? 8 million children go missing worldwide. You know, what kind of a farm is this, right? And what's going on underneath our grounds? Because we just got trillions and trillions of dollars spent, you know, on some BS space exploration, you know, which you can't even go more than like a couple hundred miles straight up before you hit the dome, right? You burn up or something, right? I don't know. They say it's Van Allen's radiation belt up there. I think it's what we have here is a fallen angel issue. And one of the dome that we have over top of our situation here now is to keep these buggers where they're staying put, right? I don't think they want them to get out too far, because I think what we got going on here in this place called Earth isn't exactly very cool, right? You know, and I think if I was an outside civilization, I wouldn't want this party coming over to my place either, right? So maybe that's why they got the firmament there, to make sure nobody can escape. I mean, even Alex Jones calls this place Prison Planet, right? But I don't know.
Yeah. But it is. We all know that, don't we? I mean, we're trapped in a sense of slavery from the powers that be. You know, we're not free.
No.
We
And see,
we're
this is where it gets into the
Hey, hang on a
descendants of
minute.
the
Sorry,
giant.
Tommy, we're getting distracted. We're on Giants. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, see,
We can
this
do
is
that
where
later.
the descendants of the giants, their whole objective is to keep humanity enslaved.
Yeah,
Right?
I think you're right. Yeah.
And this gets into a bloodline thing and who's who, And
Yeah.
see, that's why you got these 13 bloodline families that, basically don't do anything in life but collect all the cash. You got 99% of the world's population broke as a joke, 0.6% keeping the 99% in check, and the 0.4 are just running off to the cakewalk with all the cash. So less than 1% of the people are getting rich, or if you are they even people. How can a civilization have 99% of the world's population being broke as sin? Or thinking, that they're getting somewhere quick, and you can't even own property. You can buy a house for $5 million and pay it off, but if you don't pay your land taxes on that house, 3 months later they can walk in and kick you out, and you don't own that house no more. So what do you own? You register your car. Well, as soon as you register anything with Regis, that means you give it to the Queen. Regis is Regis, right? That means you've got the right to use it. You don't own it, right? That's why you got to get insurance on it, right? So you can't own your car. My dog's not registered, by the way, right? He's free.
Hey, hush. Hey, hush.
Well, this is where it's crazy because they got this maritime admiralty law thing going on, right? Where they got the land of the land of the sea, and land of the laws of the land and laws of the sea, and then the Roman Catholic Church owns everybody's soul, right? Because as soon as you're born, they take your birth certificate and they send it off to or they take your information. Your parents sign your paperwork. They take the information and send it to the Public Affairs Office. Public Affairs Office sends it over to London. They put your name on the stock market at $6.5 million a day. Then from London, it goes to the Vatican, where they claim your soul, right? And they call you lost to sea, right? And then you enter a banking system where you got to deal with currency, right? You got a bank this side. To both sides of the river got, you got the currency. It's crazy because when you're born from your mother's waters, when your mother's waters broke, right? They consider you were born under maritime admiralty law. A ship pulls into berth. Buddy gets off the ship. He goes over to the port authority. He says, here, I'm in berth number 55. Here's my certificate of manifestation. I'm worth 50 million TVs, 20 million in corn, 30 million in wheat. Here we go. Here's my birth certificate, right? Cha-ching. And now all of a sudden you're a product in the commerce, right? And all you got to do is run around, pay taxes all the rest of your life. And then when you buy a house, and you buy a car, and you buy all the insurance, and you get your education, you pay $8,000 for, and you can barely afford to pay that back, right? By the time you end up paying everything off, you're ready to die, right? And when it's said and done, you got a $5 million house that's paid for. You give it to your kids. 3 months later, they can't afford to keep the house because they can't pay the land taxes. The government will take it away. Ching. So where am I?
Hey, look who's just joined us.
Jon The Morgile.
Hello, how's it going?
Good, Jon.
Hello, Mr. Morgile. How are you? How are you, John?
Good. Sorry to interrupt you guys if I'm a little tardy and everything, but
We don't mind you interrupting us.
what is it, like 2 in the morning there?
No, it's early at the moment. It's 10 p.m.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's pretty early for us.
Yeah.
Anyway, John, just to explain to you, you know who Patricia is. You've talked to Patricia before. She's the cushion. Astral Thief, he's the one with the triangles. And then we've got Tommy Rodgers. He's from Canada.
Christians, triangles, and Canadians.
That's right.
All right.
And the subject tonight, we were talking about giants, but in a sense, we were kind of moving on. But very quickly, how are you?
Like the
John?
New York Giants, or like the spawn of the Nephilim?
Spawn of the Nephilim.
Yeah.
What's your take on that then?
I mean, there seems to be pretty good evidence. I noticed that you guys had Eric. Is it Eric Forster?
Brian Forster.
Brian Forster. Yeah, I caught some of that. What was it, like, just pretty recently? And I had seen some of his work a while back, and I thought it was good work that he was doing. I'm not sure if he does so much with the giants, but at least the giant elongated skulls. But it just seems like there have been documented cases of people within the last 100 years, at least, finding tombs and crypts and skeletons of these really quite giant people. And it seems like, especially in the Americas, they'll find, very large, giant, red-headed people when it's supposedly, we were only supposed to have Native Americans. And what it appears is that every time people discover these sorts of things, there will be some trace of, documentation on it, journalism on it. But then the Smithsonian in particular and other such museums that are supposedly there to preserve history come and snatch up all the evidence and essentially either destroy it or bury it, or maybe they're doing something more nefarious with the DNA. That's maybe up to some speculation, but yeah, it really appears that there's something to this. And it seems to me like one of the main motives would be, if they're going to hide, why would they want to hide this? Well, it does sort of fly in the face of evolution, or the theory of evolution, because that whole string involves beings or races or whatever you want to call it, adapting to the environment and getting better and better, survival of the fittest. And I don't particularly see any way that getting probably stupider and smaller and weaker could be any sort of survival of the fittest advantage. And that seems like it could be one motive for them to hide this sort of thing, because supposedly we're much more intelligent and healthy and living longer than our ancient ancestors did. But if these giants were a couple meters tall and living 200 years or whatever, then it would seem as if the laws of entropy are taking effect as they should, and instead of us getting better and better, maybe we're actually devolving, if you will. But maybe there's some other explanation to it. So yeah, I'm fascinated with the topic, and I think that there's probably something to it, but I've personally never discovered a giant skeleton. So there always is that sort of thing in the back of your head saying, well, maybe this is a bunch of people doing hoaxes, like you get the impression of that with the crop circles. But then when you dig a little deeper into it, and even with the crop circles, you find, well, maybe there is something to this, and you have all of these instances of people hoaxing these events so that the media has something to talk about and obfuscate the truth with, so that people are left sort of debating, what is actually going on to infinity, as opposed to really actually studying the situation. So it's like the debate is, not what is this situation, it's, well, does this situation even exist, right? And you see that tactic time and time again with just a broad spectrum of things, where if people are questioning the normal accepted version of things, whatever it is, something that I've sort of been on a kick with here lately, because maybe incorporating some of this stuff into a video, or maybe all of my videos in the future, is this whole thing with psychopathy, psychopaths. And the debate in that community and in the head shrinker community is a lot of the time is, well, do psychopaths even exist, or what is the definition of a psychopath? And so instead of actually finding solutions to the problem, which there are some that are still doing that, but the broad scope of the community, instead of actually trying to find solutions to these problems or answers to the questions, they're debating, ad nauseum as to whether this issue actually even exists in the first place, or what is the particular, what is this particular issue? So, you just see this all over the place. You see it with things like the Twin Towers and all the other events that shall not be named on YouTube. And yeah. So
Plenty
yeah.
of books about that. Plenty of books about that. That 9/11.
Yeah.
Plenty of books. Yeah.
Sure.
People that know. Yeah, but this about the giants. I mean, it's intriguing, because I seem to also be stumbling across more that they were green-eyed, red hair, especially red hair. The double rows of teeth, 6 fingers, 6 toes. Was it, Tommy? And the height of them. I mean, I was looking at something where there was, it was a guy explaining a story that he'd been told that's been passed down from generation through generations, in the South American jungles, and these were telling of stories of giants, that had special powers, but they were more spiritual in that sense, that they weren't, you know, when they were talking or anything. They were more, you know, it was kind of a thought thing that they did. So that we've regressed, definitely. We're not advanced now. We can speak, we know less in a sense, you know, because I think then because they could communicate on a different level than what we do today with, you know, audio and, you know, visual and what have you. I just think that, yeah, I can't understand where they went to, you know. I mean, okay, maybe they're hidden, maybe they are underneath, down in some sort of giant catacombs, you know, who knows? But it's worth looking into anyway, definitely. And there is a lot of evidence out there, photographs showing these giants taken beside normal average sized people, you know, and the skulls are just enormous on some of these. I mean, I've sent some photos there for Karen to show,
I've
so that
already
other people
showed
in
them.
the chat can have a look. Yeah, oh, okay.
I didn't see him.
Right. Well, you can
Well,
show them
I've seen
again,
it.
Karen.
I'll show them again.
Yeah,
Listen,
but,
do you know what though? When Jon The Morgile said what he said, and you just repeated it about those senses, they've always told us that's what the aliens were like.
And what was that?
Well, when they went on about any beings being able to communicate telepathically and all that, they've told us that it's aliens.
Did I say that?
No, you were saying that maybe they're. Who was it? I'm sorry. Maybe
I must have misheard. No worries. I was just confused. So we're talking like telepathy, and yeah, the whole shtick is that it's aliens that are sort of communicating telepathically. But so
after all, it was the giants. That's what I mean. That's the ironic thing, isn't it? Because everything so far is the other way around, isn't it? Everything we've been told, everything is the opposite to what they've told us.
Yeah, well, and that's sort of a good way to approach pretty much everything in the mainstream, at least. And what I've found is that whatever they're preaching and whatever they're repeating all over the place, I sort of automatically consider that a lie unless there's evidence shown to the otherwise, just sort of as a rule of thumb. And I had someone approach me not too long ago on some social media platform, and I read they made a comment about, you know, Aleister Crowley, how he was paraded and still is paraded as the wickedest man in the world, and how, you know, we shouldn't believe that because that's what history states. And, you know, I'm not necessarily agreeing with him, but it's an interesting conversation. And one of the things I asked him was like, well, what about, you know, in one of his books, he claims that the best sacrifice is a young, blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy from the age, whatever age, is very specific about who they would target with this satanic ritual abuse and ultimately kill. And I said, what about that? Is that just, you know, him being blown out of proportion or taken out of context? And, you know, he didn't really have an answer for it, but, you know, so I don't know how far, I guess the point with that is I don't know how far you want to go with that default stance. Is, you know, whatever the mainstream tells you, then we should sort of automatically, well, at least approach skeptically, certainly not agree with automatically, and maybe not particularly disagree with automatically, but at least to have that healthy skepticism. But again, you know, how far do you go with that? I don't want to necessarily say that, yeah, Aleister Crowley must have been a hero, you know, because of this. Same sort of thing could go with maybe like Hitler, and, you know, others do go down that road, and maybe there's something to all this. But, you know, again, you also have to watch out for people on social media who will take these sort of, I guess you could say, anti-establishment stances, and it is very easy to want to agree with them because of how much we've been lied to by the mainstream. But, you know, I think it's just important that we don't necessarily swing way to the other side of this spectrum where we can be manipulated by people just because they're an alternative to the mainstream. So who the hell really knows, though, right?
Yeah, too much lying, isn't there, going on about everything, about history, about the giants, about everything. It's just too many lies.
Yeah, indeed.
We're stuck in the middle of not knowing who to trust anymore. Because how do you, even if, you know, a convex map came out the other week, didn't it? Oh, well, there's something wrong with that one as well. Like, why can't just one of them be quite representative, really representative of what we're living in if they're going to do it? But anyway, yeah, I agree. But it is hard to know what is the truth and what isn't anymore.
Well, and I think with flat Earth at this point in the game, it's pretty much impossible for us, even with our current technology. We do have limitations, and I think that we're led to believe that there are no limitations to what our technology can do. But you know, for example, not a lot of people go free roaming down or whichever direction to the Antarctic. And by design, you know, we can't do that. Corporations can't go and set up shop in the Antarctic. It's only, you know, scientific progress that, you know, you can go down there for scientific reasons or for studying,
Probably
but
a lot of
government,
giants in there.
right. But so, you know, by design, I just don't think that even with our current technology, we can't get a good estimation to flesh out what the Earth, what are we actually dealing with. And I just think that if we were able to easily, you know, have access to the Antarctic and unbiased geodetic surveying, I think at that point that we could get much better models and maps.
Can I interrupt you there, John?
Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm wondering why all these, you know, like the Pope, he went down to Antarctica. John Kerry? He also went down to Antarctica. You've got these like people. Is it one of the princes from England went also down there? Spunk Bubble. I don't know his name, but you know these, you know, people of power or people of, you know, importance. Why are they traveling down there? I mean, it's like, yeah, last place, you know, to go on holiday, isn't it? If you know what I mean. But I mean, there must be something there for them to go down there, you know, and that like tweaks my imagination, you know. And now I'm like Tommy says, you open one door, you see another 10 behind it, and then when you open, you know, one of those doors, there's another 20 behind that door. It's like, yeah, where does it flipping end?
Well, it seems like maybe a publicity stunt. I've thought about that a little bit, and you know, one of the flat Earth arguments, and a lot of people do take the AE projection and call it a model, and I just don't necessarily think that's a correct step. There's a big difference between a map or a projection and a model. But even with that aside, you know, that argument that there's something going on in Antarctica and with the Antarctic Treaty, somehow that gets, with the old telephone game, that gets changed to Antarctica doesn't exist. And then, of course, you get people who will say, well, look, here's a picture of John Kerry in the Antarctic. So, you know, flat earthers are all wrong. And so there is maybe something to that. And, you know, the mainstream really does prey upon the fact that most people will not do much research into a topic. You know, if they hear about flat earth, they're going to Google search, you know, debunking flat earth, and they might find a couple of things like, you know, pictures of John Kerry or whomever down there. But I actually started reading, well, I say reading, but listening to an audiobook. I'm about halfway through it, by Lovecraft, The Mountains of Madness. And it's all about these guys taking a trip down to the Antarctic and finding all sorts of bizarre Lovecraftian things down there. But, you know, there is a bit of a mystique around the Antarctic. Even in the last several hundred years, navigators who knew exactly what they were doing just found all sorts of anomalies and weren't able to circumnavigate the far, far south. And then we get things like the Antarctica Cup Challenge in the modern sense, where it is a misnomer. Usually these Antarctica yachts are racing around about the 45-degree south latitude, not even approaching anywhere near the Antarctic Circle. And even the one Fedor Konyakov, who holds all the records for the farthest south circumnavigation and the fastest time, he even admits that he was in the 50 degrees south, maybe approaching 60 degrees south for some short duration of that circumnavigation. So to claim that going around or whatever around the 45 and 50 degrees south latitudes is simply not circumnavigating the South Pole, as it were. And the other big thing is you would expect to see circumpolar circumnavigation at some point, where somebody starts in the North Pole, goes all the way down one single latitude, longitude line, crosses over the South Pole, and then goes along the anti-longitudinal line of that. And we would see commercial flights that take advantage of this shortcut on a globe, and they just come up with excuses as to why we don't see all these things. And so it really does, for the mainstream to come out with pictures of celebrities and politicians doing photo ops down there, it just seems to me like maybe it's some ammunition to say, well, Antarctica exists, therefore flat earthers are a bunch of idiots, and for some people that actually does work. So maybe that's it.
They have also in the South. They have also in the South Atlantic this. It's a new treaty that they've signed only in the last couple of years, I do believe, where it's also like a no-go zone now. A nature reserve, isn't it? A massive. I mean, this is a giant area that we're talking about, and it's a guarded area. Have you heard about that?
It was made a protected region in 1957 when the original Antarctica Treaty started up. Right, you can't go below the 60th parallel now at all. Right, that's the new treaty.
Sorry, Tommy, the one I'm thinking about. This is quite recently, within
the new one now is you can't go below
anyway.
the 60th parallel whatsoever.
Yeah, but this is just the South Atlantic, basically. The South Atlantic, where they're, it's a giant area, which is more or less, you cannot go there. And it's also raising questions, why not? I mean, if people want to fish there, maybe, or go sailing there,
Well, and isn't that I guess maybe I'm wrong, but Magna Carta or something like that any flowing waters, rivers, oceans are essentially free territory where you should be able to do pretty much whatever you want, within reason, I guess. But even that, I mean, in America, it's like if you want to go and get bottled water, it's as expensive as gasoline or petroleum or whatever.
Yeah, it's
Sorry, Tommy?
No, it's he's right. I was just agreeing with him, right? About with the bottled water and stuff like that, it's going to be expensive because even there's that one guy from Texas. He says, and even he says, human beings don't deserve the right to have water. They should pay for it, right? And he owns a lake in Texas. And then there's a big dispute going on with Nestle draining the Great Lakes, and now Nestle's taking all the water off the Mexican people, and the Mexican people don't have any water in their wells because Nestle's cleaning out the water supply, and these people are kind of like John was saying, the bottle of water is going to cost you as much as a bottle of gasoline, right?
Well, and it sort of already does. And the thing is like in America, I think it's about 85 or maybe by now upwards of 90% of all municipal water sources are treated with fluoride, which is a developmental neurotoxin, and just all sorts of. I mean, you don't even want to bathe in this stuff, honestly, let alone drink it. You can't boil it out. And so a lot of people turn to bottled water, which a lot of times isn't much better, to be honest. Most of the bottled waters that you find, if you test it with a fluoride ionization test, it comes up with the same thing. But yeah, you're right. Nestle is just ruthless. They're basically, even though the people of the state voted against them being able to do that, they went ahead and did it anyway with the consent of the government. And so it is just like, it doesn't make any sense as to how would people let this happen when it's obviously not in the interest of the people. It's only benefiting a few. And that actually kind of dovetails into what I mentioned earlier. My research lately has led me into looking at psychopathy, which is a very misunderstood thing, but it definitely is a thing. And if you just think about it for a few minutes, psychopaths do exist. They're very cunning. They're charismatic. Corporations in general, which in America are legally considered to be equal to people, so they have all the rights of people. corporations are pretty much all heavily psychopathic, and probably run by psychopaths.
No
And so
doubt.
when you look at it through that lens, it makes a lot of sense, frankly, that people would be making decisions that have just all sorts of terrible repercussions for everybody, even themselves in the long run, but they're making a buck. They don't care about the consequences. And this is patently psychopathic behavior. And if you suggest that perhaps there are psychopaths up in the upper echelons making these decisions, if you test that theory, you will find evidence to support it. But this is a whole big thing, to where, like I said, psychologists can't even necessarily agree on what is psychopathy, and what's the difference between antisocial or antisocial disorder and psychopathy. And there are some differences, but it does make a lot of sense. I mean, even with things like NASA and the ball Earth lie, if you've got, just humoring this hypothesis, if you actually have psychopaths that are up making these big decisions, and they have somehow found a way to identify psychopaths in society, which probably wouldn't be too hard to do. It seems like psychopaths have this innate ability to just naturally target people who are good victims, and they're good at reading people through body language and other passive factors. So to me, it wouldn't be that big of a surprise to learn that psychopaths can identify one another. It takes one to know one. And so if these guys or gals at some point in history found their way to the upper levels of their spheres of influence and power, which is what psychopaths tend to aspire to, they want to become the greatest thing in the world. They already think that they are. So if you get a handful of these guys and gals in power, and they're smart enough to set up a platform or a framework that allows young and budding psychopaths of the next generation, if you will, to step up and get bolstered and placed into positions of power and wealth and influence. Give that a few generations, and you've got a world that looks pretty much like the one that we're stepping into. And so, while I'm not necessarily saying that this is definitely what's going on, I would say you can't rule it out. And to me, it makes a lot more sense than, to say something like green reptilians are running the show. To me, it would make a lot more sense. And in some cases, it could be argued that psychopaths, the worst of them, really aren't even human, because it seems like one of the biggest things to be human is to be able to empathize with others and to learn from your mistakes. And people that have had close encounters with psychopaths will say things like they're cold-blooded, they're like a snake. And so maybe maybe David Icke isn't too far off. And I love David Icke's work, but it just makes a lot more sense to me that something that is real and natural and that we know exists would work a lot better for this argument than little green men. But who knows?
You're saying, John, though, isn't it? It's just, this was the program. It's so that we can't work out our history and what's the truth. We don't know who we are, and nobody likes each other. We're quite stressed, and we don't have any feelings, and no one cares about anybody. That's part of the program.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, John Lennon said it the best. This
Right.
world's run by psychopaths, and they'll probably lock me up thinking I'm a psychopath for saying they're psychopaths.
Right. Yeah.
And the world's run by a bunch of psychopaths, right? And it's true. I mean, because I just the conduct that you see our governments taking place in, and the participation of the stupidness that they get involved with, it's like none of it makes any sense whatsoever. So I mean, yeah, they are psychopaths, and then every good psychopath to me is an asshole. Pardon me, but you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And
Well, and there's so many of them out there.
yeah, this is
You look at things like Manchurian candidates, and that's something that I've been fascinated with for years. And that would be to say, people who are somehow plucked up by the government, put through mind control, trauma-based mind control programming, where their personalities are essentially split up by trauma and then put back together, where the individual will invent other personalities that, and this is obviously schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder that they sort of put into people. But if they could somehow screen for psychopathy, because it seems like psychopaths are, there is a genetic element to it, and there's also environmental element to it. So like, genetics or your genes might load the gun, so to speak, and then environment would pull the trigger in some cases. But so if they could screen for that and put people that are naturally prone to psychopathy into these programs, they would make for excellent Manchurian candidates, or spies, if you will, Jason Bourne identities or whatever. And this got me to thinking, it is sort of the general consensus that psychopaths have been in society forever. It's a natural part of evolution, so they claim. But since, I've been in really serious doubt of evolution for several years now, it gets you to thinking of other things, if nothing else, than for argument's sake. And we've certainly seen a rise in at least the actions of psychopaths in the last 100 years, where we've just got, a school shooting and just awful things happening all the time, apparently. Perhaps this is something that may not have been in society forever. Maybe it's not part of, evolution, if that even is a thing. And this is just total conjecture here, but I'm sort of thinking that perhaps it has something to do with the most nefarious and insidious mass mind control device or technique ever known to humankind, and that's of course the television. And so this is just one of my theories here, but if they can get people at a very young age plopped in front of the television, if they have the genetic predisposition along with environmental factors, I think that the television, especially at very young ages, could have a huge role in developing psychopathy, because it seems to me that one of the most key factors of being a psychopath is, one, having absolutely no ability to empathize or to concern yourself with the consequences of your actions, and also to want to inflict violence or damage or just hurt people, because that's what makes you tick as a psycho, it seems. And it just seems like the television is the perfect platform, not only physiologically to physically change one's brainwave patterns, because there is a major difference in a psychopath's brainwave patterns than a regular normal brain. That's demonstrable, it's empirical. And so the television, it seems, could play a role in that. But then also you have things like, just the ultra violence that you see even in movies and shows geared towards younger audiences. And of course, all that violence mixed in with sexual stuff without any consequences for it. So you can watch people getting shot and blown up all day long on the television, but you're never going to get hurt. And it just seems like maybe there could be something to this. Perhaps the television is lending itself to creating psychopaths. And if the government needs these sorts of people to do their dirty work without any sort of conscience about it, and great rewards and high risks, it wouldn't be too difficult, I don't think. But again, this is theoretical. It's just something that I've been kicking around a little bit, and it answers a lot of questions. I mean, it really does. If you look at history and how things have gone in the last at least 100 years, just for an example, it would answer a lot of questions without going out into the realm of, it's aliens or something, right?
Hey, John, do you think it's partly to do, especially now, is the fact that so many people are waking up. And the thing is that they've put millions and trillions of dollars and all this time and made this great big matrix to keep this lie, then they're going to fight even harder to keep the lie.
Yeah, I think so. And you know, at the same time, I mean, as much progress as we've made here recently with flat Earth and getting people woke up to it, at the same time, it is still very fringe. And the majority of people, if they've ever heard of it, they're incredulous about it. They don't want to hear about it. And the majority of people, even if you tell them about it, they don't believe you. They think that you're crazy and stupid and you don't understand. And it's very difficult to get through to a person. In fact, probably impossible. The best you can do is to get them interested in it so that they do their own research, and eventually perhaps they will come around to it. But you're never, well, almost never going to just convince someone that the earth is flat in a 30-minute conversation. And so that, you know, there is a big advantage there for the powers which ought not be. And so I guess the point would be, you know, yes, they do want to keep their deception going. They are going to fight for it. But at the same time, you know, they don't have to try that hard. They don't even try most of the time to debunk flat Earth arguments. They just continue making fun of it because, frankly, that's good enough, at least for now. But yeah, they have invested a lot into this lie, but it's not like that they care. They print the money. They steal our money to keep these lies going. So it's not like it's a financial issue for them. And again, you know, even if you tell somebody, hey, you know, the Earth's flat, it's not a spinning ball, and prove it to them, they'll be like, ah, whatever, you don't know, you don't understand the ball, and that's that. So I don't know.
Yeah,
The thing is that when carry on, Tommy, you go. It's okay.
yeah, John hit it right on the nail there. This I got a book here by Kathy O'Brien. It's called Transformation of America, and it's all about MK Ultra mind control. And John's talking exactly everything that's in this book is ding, 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 ding that's going on right now. Gets back involved with the Tavistock industry or institute, and then the whole thing about you got Aldous Huxley and his Brave New World stuff that's taking place today. George Orwell. All this stuff that John's talking about is all being played out right before our eyes, and everybody's just chewing on the fluoride bars, just going along with the story. And I try to wake people up just as much as John and everybody else, but it's so difficult because, like, you deal with people in public out there that are brainwashed into just believing they live on a ball, and they're going through time and space, traveling at 66.6 thousand miles a minute, and everything's all good. And don't even talk about the TV, because that was created by the world's most evilest people going. And this was done by design as well, because the only way you can really control the masses as the populations were growing, because the radio wasn't going to be dinging on it at all. Even though my dog's going to...
Your dog agrees,
the music
Tommy.
industry
Dog
itself...
agrees.
The music industry itself is very influenced by Aleister Crowley. And this is about talk backwards, walk backwards, play guitar backwards, sing backwards. This gets into reverse speech technology. And so when you combine what John was saying with the television and then the music, and then everybody drinking alcohol and chewing on fluoride bars, it's tough. It's really tough to wake people up. And sometimes I get very discouraged, because I find the most difficult people to wake up are the people that you love the most. And like, I got two brothers that I care about dearly, and they just don't want to even hear anything I say about it. They just, no, don't even talk about it. It's like, go home if you're going to start your whatever, you know what I'm saying? And I just like, what do you do? Right. You know,
Yeah, that's the worst. Frankly, I've got a friend for years, worked with them for 5-6 years, and still keep in touch with them, you know, from time to time on Skype or whatever. And I don't know, a couple years ago, I approached him with Flat Earth, just told him, hey, you know, have you looked into this, and put some arguments down for him. And after a couple of maybe a couple days, couple of exchanges with this, he basically told me the same thing. You know, he was like, I don't want to hear it anymore. You know, don't even bother talking to me if you're going to bring up flat Earth. I don't care. It's bullshit. Excuse the French. Doesn't want to hear it. And that is, it's a little bit disheartening, because if we can't even get through to the people that we know and that we're close with, the people who know we're not stupid, what chance do we have with everyone else who's already going to have all of these preconceived notions, because they don't know us, and because we're online or whatever. What chance do we have? But again, when you're casting a much broader net, of course, you're going to get more people involved, or whatever, for lack of a better analogy. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It is a little frustrating.
Yeah, definitely. I recently I went to two meetups here in Toronto. I went to Mark Sargent put on a thing for us, and a little pump for us in February. So I went and met. I thought there was going to be a lot more people there, but I went to the first meetup. There was 6 people there, and then the second meetup I just went to at Spin Ping Pong, and I met Mark Sargent and Patricia Steer just like last week. They're going to see that preview of that thing they did with that filming thing, and I thought there's gonna be a lot more people there, but there was like 6 people at the first flat Earth thing, and then the second one I went to with Mark and Patricia, and I met Mig Mag and a bunch of people there, Sugar Bush 905, and a bunch of other cool people. But there's only about 20 people there. I was kind of hoping there was going to be like 50 or 100 people there, but hey, maybe next time. But sometimes I get it's there's 7 million people here on a good day, probably even closer to 8 in the summer, right? And for only 20 people to show up and have Mark Sargent and Patricia Steer there, and there was a big push on it. Like, I got Flat Earth Toronto on Facebook, and I try and do a lot of pushing on that. And I got Toronto Tommy's Truth Academy, which is more than just flat Earth; it's about everything, right? And I try and promote all the positive truth about things, and trying to get everybody to waken up. And I'm a pro health person, even though like I wasn't so healthy in my past. But I mean, I guess I had to learn how to get where I'm at today. But the thing is, I try and be a truther, and sometimes being a truther sucks. And then I start looking at the Bible, and then Jesus said, "Well, like, you're gonna follow me, you're gonna be hated just like I was." And I don't get me wrong, like, I'm not a Bible thumping kind of guy, but I just kind of use that as a kind of a code book of my morals and my standards of just kind of trying to be a good fellow. I was raised a Roman Catholic, so it's kind of hard for me not to spit that whole doctrine out of my system in one big foul swoop, because I do learn a lot of stuff through these ancient, historical books. So I mean, I can't just throw them out with the bathwater. But then again, I got to understand there's a whole bunch of books that are missing from this King James version of the Bible, and so I look at the extra books as well, and that's where I find I learn a lot more about what's going on here. And I find that the English language is barely 500 years old to what we are running with today, and these guys got everybody living under spellcraft, right? And I got some books here on H.P. Lovecraft too, so I'm glad to hear you're looking at that stuff too. But I do a lot of research with witchcraft and how the whole they got everybody living under spells, and the first thing they teach you in school is how to spell, right? And then our English language is kind of like a really conundrum of, like, you can count your numerology goes from A to Z on your fingertips. So I got some Marty Leeds books here, and that stuff's fascinating to me as well. So it's like I said, it's a conundrum, but you're dead on with the TV and the way that we've been programmed and the way this society is being run. And I've been following you for a long time, and you got some great information out there, John. And I appreciate all your work you've been doing, you and Glowbusters and Journalism and all these people out there. And I think guys are great. I just wish we really had an idea exactly where we are, because we still don't even know where we are. I mean, we got NASA. It was just a bunch of NASA in Hebrew means deceiver.
Right? Yeah. Well, I think one thing that we do know is we definitely know where we're not, and we definitely know that we're not on a spinning ball. And I don't know if any of y'all caught Jaron did well, it was supposed to be a sit-down discussion but ended up being sort of a really poorly moderated debate with this guy named Aaron Raw. And one of his main arguments was that, so you can't, you say that you know where we're not, and so you're so much smarter. And Jaron never said any of this, but the guy was basically creating a straw man to frame Jaron's actual position. So he's like, you can't just argue all the time that you're smarter than everybody in history and all the scientists in history because you know that they were wrong, but you don't know what the answer is. You can't argue that. And, frankly, I would disagree. If empirical testing shows us the Earth isn't in motion and nor does it have any curvature, then it couldn't by nature be a spinning ball. And so this whole position that this guy had would be like, if your car breaks down and stops running, won't start, and you take it to a mechanic and you say, I need to get my car fixed, and the mechanic's like, well, what's wrong with it? And you're like, I don't know. That's why I took it to you. I need to know what's wrong with it and get it fixed. The mechanic's like, well, how do you know that it's broken if you don't know how to fix it? Right? And I think that's a really good analogy because if you know that the Earth isn't a spinning ball, we don't have to answer all the other questions that stem from the hypothesis that the Earth is a spinning ball. Infinite space and the stars being so distant is all a portion, or it all stems from this underlying belief in a spinning ball Earth. And so
the problem is people, they do not think. I mean, when I say think, I mean like go beyond the normal parameters of thought. I mean, expand your thought. It's as simple as that. That's the way I came across it anyway. That's the way that I solved it. This is how I satisfied my curiosity. You needed to, I mean, be open. God damn it. It was like and I tried to explain once a few years back. It bit me in the ass, man, I tell you. This guy attacked me. I don't mean physically, but verbally attacked me. Like I was the most insane person on earth, and he was gone from the nicest guy. He did a 180 degrees flip on me and went to being, I mean, I don't really speak too much more, but I've not lost any love or anything, I mean, I still love the guy, don't get me wrong, but his understanding, that will never happen because I think there must be some sort of polarization where we are attracted to this and they are repelled by it. It's probably that, isn't it? Because some people get it and others just do not.
Yeah.
Did I just? Oh, sorry, I unmuted myself. I think that one of the biggest problems for people to come to terms with this, well, it's obviously the programming that we were all subjected to for a long time, but some people are just frankly not interested in science and specifically not interested in theoretical astrophysics and stuff like that. So a lot of people that you approach with, at least in the US, will say, what difference does it make? Who cares? It doesn't affect my life. Don't want to hear about it in that respect. And so there's not a whole lot you can do to approach them to get them interested. And so a lot of people may be lost causes, but the ones who are interested in that sort of thing, there's a whole other aspect to deal with. And if we know where we're not, we know the Earth isn't a spinning ball, and you try to show that to someone else, if they start to see any truth in it, which is difficult because of that programming, that they're forced to deal with some really frightening prospects, which would include, things like we were lied to, we were fooled for our whole lives. So that's a pretty frightening thing for some to try to deal with, because a lot of people are just not very introspective, not very self-criticizing, and that's a survival mechanism to an extent, but at the same time, it can be a fault. Another thing to deal with is all of the answers that we thought we had and that we've built our entire paradigm around, often to an extent that we don't even realize the full extent to it. It's an underlying subconscious factor for pretty much everyone, whether they know it or not, because they were raised in an environment amongst other people who all believe this absurd, ridiculous, belittling to humanity lie. And so all of these answers that we believe that we have, that we've built this paradigm around, when you get rid of those, then it's very frightening to deal with, because then we almost have to, in many cases, reinvent who we are, or re-establish the core of all of our beliefs. And frankly, a lot of people, most people, are just not going to be able to do that. You would have to really smack them with some heavy duty introspection to be able to do that. And so that's also frightening. There's probably a much longer list, but there's things like this that you have to deal with. And so instead of trying to deal with that, I think it seems to me like it's a self-defense mechanism of the psyche or of the mind, to realize, hey, that seems like it's going to be a lot of work, and we might deal with some things within ourselves that we don't necessarily like, and we're not even going to go down that road. And that sort of decision would be made in an instant in your subconscious without you really even knowing it, because of the fact that we've all been subjected to this just absurd, absolute ridiculous lie for our whole lives. But that is sort of how the human mind is a wonderful thing in terms of protecting itself from having to break itself down and reinvent ourselves. It's what makes us stable, most of us stable people. So I think that that's probably one of the biggest things, to be honest, that because the programming that I talk about a lot is very powerful. People only see what they believe to be possible. So even though we've all lived on a stationary plane our whole lives, when we see the Earth, we see a picture in our mind, or even when we hear the word Earth, even still to this day, after being a flat earther for 3 years, if I picture the image of the word Earth in my mind, I see an image of the planet Earth, the blue marble from NASA. And I believe something like that is probably going to be permanent, because it was developed. We all have, to some degree or another, from what I've been told, we see pictures in our mind for any, most words, probably not but things like Earth or planet or whatever. There's picture associations. That's kind of how our mind works. Now, we may be able to think.
Sorry.
Sure.
Sorry, it's good this, but when I see the word Earth, I see the word heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and maybe I wasn't necessarily saying that everybody would see what I see. But I suppose if you were to poll 100 people, that would be an interesting result as to what images they have associated with different words. But, I guess my point is that even...
John, even as a flat earther, sometimes you occasionally stick the wrong words in because you're so used to saying them that even though you still can't help it every now and again.
Oh, yeah. It's very powerful.
You know what? In a sense, absolutely nothing has changed, but everything has changed. But once you see it, you can't go back. You just can't.
Yeah. Yep. So the programming, and it was so strong. Any argument that we might have had when we were introduced to this idea was just squashed by people who believe it, whether it's your parents or your school. I remember totally being completely incredulous, because my dad would have taught me about the globe really early. I was probably 3 or 4, something like that. And I remember being incredulous, thinking that was ridiculous when I was really young. And then at some point, you're forced to agree. You can't disagree with it. I remember that. And even later on, I think I was maybe 10 or 11 or so. I was still pretty young. I took my first airline flight from Florida to Texas, Orlando to Dallas, Fort Worth. And I got a two-way ticket. And when I got on the flight going to Texas, I was looking at the return flight information, or maybe I was thinking about it. Maybe I didn't have the ticket, but I remember wondering at that point on the flight, on my first flight, how much faster was the eastbound flight going to be? Or, maybe I wasn't thinking that far into it, but I was just wanting to see what the difference in the durations would be. And so I remember somehow, maybe it was on the ticket, noticing that the two flights were practically, if not identical in terms of duration. And so there is a time zone difference, and I would have, checked that and, figured it up. Yeah, it's the duration's right. And then showing that to my aunt as soon as I landed, because my aunt lives in or lived in Fort Worth, and she told me, and she's very, very intelligent. She went to Cornell University, graduated summa cum laude, and I don't remember exactly what, but really, really smart person, awesome person. When I went to Texas, we took a shuttle run canoe trip down the Red River for, God, it was like 4 days, and camped 4 days and nights, camped out on the sand dunes on the banks of the river. So we had a really good time. But when I landed there and told her this, I said, this is crazy. This means the Earth isn't spinning, because the two flights are identical in duration. There's no big difference. What's up with that? And of course, she thought about it for a minute and said, well, no, you don't understand. It's the plane is, either way, it holds the momentum with the Earth as its frame of reference. And even though the plane takes off, it's still spinning with the Earth. And she, sort of explained it away and patched it over. And of course, I was forced to not think anything of it. And I remember her being sort of offended. And I remember her getting a little bit upset about it, and thinking that, wow, I sort of hit a hot button there. And then she explained it away, and I was okay with it. And there was a couple other instances like that I could remember, not with flights or anything, but I think one of them would have had to do with gravity and the spinning of the Earth. You should have a centripetal and centrifugal force. The centrifugal force would not be uniform depending on your latitude. So like if you're at the equator, supposedly you should be spinning around an axis of nearly 4,000 miles at 1,000 miles an hour. Whereas at the, say, 10-degree north latitude, you'd be spinning around an axis of only, a few, maybe 1,000 miles or less, and spinning much, much slower than 1,000 miles an hour, maybe spinning at 100 allegedly. Yet the centripetal force would be uniform all over the hypothetical globe. So it wouldn't matter where you're at on the globe. Gravity would have the same effect or the same acceleration, 9.8 meters per
They
second
never
squared.
talk about this in schools, do they, John? About all these differences.
That's right.
Pilots have told us if we were spinning, it would be impossible to land the plane. And then you're right. I'm spinning slower than you. So there has to be a change in something from me to you. And anyways, it got faster. I think it'd be the worst roller coaster ride of your life. I wouldn't want to be on the plane.
Yeah. No, well, and in terms of at the equator, you're supposedly spinning east at 1,000 miles an hour, but if you look at a tangent from the curve and consider any base starting point at the equator, you would be vertically descending from that tangent line at 135 miles an hour. So that would be almost as fast as the fastest roller coaster. The fastest roller coaster, I think, I want to say was 142 or 147 miles an hour at its fastest point. And so that has the alleged vertical descent due to axial rotation along that curve beat by something like 10 miles an hour, but not by much. But of course, that roller coaster would not also have the 1,000 mile an hour linear frame of reference, of course. But so, yeah, the spinning ball Earth should be almost as pretty much damn near as fast as the world's fastest roller coaster going vertically downward along that curve. But on the other hand, like I said, at the very close to the North Pole, you wouldn't have hardly any. You would have practically zero centrifugal force. And yet gravity is supposedly applying itself to the sphere Earth equally at all points. And so when you realize that you should have a huge disparity in terms of weight on a scale, depending on your latitude, especially when you're talking about the equator to something extremely in the north or whatever, there should be a huge disparity. And yet what we do see in reality is such a very minor disparity in weight on a scale between the the equator and say the North Pole, there is a minor difference. It's very minor, and it does go in the direction that you would expect if the Earth was a sphere, because again, you would have more centrifugal force at the equator and X amount of gravity. At the equator compared to the North Pole, you would have the same amount of gravity, but hardly any centrifugal force. So gravity would have less counter force to balance itself out with, and thus gravity would be applying itself to a much higher degree at the northernmost latitudes as compared to the North Pole. And so since we do see a very, very minor difference in that, globers have figured out mathemagic to back engineer how that would work on a spinning globe. So their answer is going to be correct. Their answer is based on an observation of what we actually see. However, in my opinion, you should have an astronomical difference in weight on a scale comparing these two locations. So like a ton of coffee should weigh just way more, maybe 100,000 times more at the North Pole. Yet it weighs like, I don't even remember what the amount is. It's like 0.04 kilograms per gram or something like that. I don't even remember what it is, but it's very minute. However, that it's argued that we see this tiny little fraction of increase of weight on a scale in the northernmost latitudes. And so therefore it all works out beautifully. But in fact, it doesn't. You would just, when you travel to the North Pole, like a 175-pound man should weigh, I don't know, like 100,000 pounds if they're standing 4 miles from the North Pole.
I'm just thinking, John, right? Maybe we could do some sort of silly experiment. You take a normal scale, what you weigh yourself on, put a standard, I'll tell you what, just for fun, we'll put a litre of water. A litre of water should weigh 1 kilo. And we can take a piece of string that's, say, 2 meters long, 1 meter long, that'll be better. A piece of string, 1 meter long, attached to the scale, and then we can swing it around, right, and get this water jug on it and see what the weight will give in different places around the so-called plane, where we're living, for fun.
Yeah. I mean, you could probably set up something like that if you had a large enough couple of axes. I don't guess you would have to even necessarily use a sphere. You could just use one axis that's, 4 foot long, and another axis that's 1 foot long, and compare. But the centrifugal force, just point blank, is totally dependent on the edge velocity and the angular momentum. So the radius, edge velocity and radius. If you've got a very large radius and very high speeds, and therefore relative to you, the observer, 135 miles an hour vertically descending due to 1,000-mile-an-hour curved linear forward motion, that's just an astronomical amount of centrifugal force that should be experienced relative to you, the observer. And you physically compare that to a much slower, much smaller radius spinning, and there would be a phenomenal difference in that centrifugal force. And yet you don't see. I would love to. I think we should do some experiments like that. And like you said, maybe put some fluid into some kind of a beaker and put it at an angle,
Because
so that the higher you.
I'm just thinking, like, then it's the same weight. 1 litre of water. Well, all right. Yeah, there might be a slight difference, but I would imagine 1 litre of water in Denmark weighs the same as a litre of water in Canada, in Australia, and in the USA.
Yeah, there is a small difference, and I think that probably has to do with overall barometric pressure, because there is, there are.
That's the other thing, then, isn't it?
Yeah. And, well, I mean, it's argued, and I've seen good enough evidence where I can say safely, without any shame about it, that there's good evidence to support that there is a lower.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lower average overall barometric pressure in the in the north. Maybe I have this backwards. So if you lived on a ball, you should weigh less at the equator, because centrifugal force would be higher. You should weigh more at the North Pole because centrifugal force would be nil, essentially. Yeah, but yeah, so that sort of experiment would be an interesting thing to do. I sort of got sidetracked there. Sorry. No, I got a distraction. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, y'all. Yeah.
Yes, there's something else that's going on here as well, by the way. I know, so there's two things I was thinking while that was going on. Astral always says we're not in touch with nature enough. And so that's what they've done. They've taken us well away from nature. And now look what we're arguing over. It's just money and other stupid. And the other thing that they've done to do this is subversion. We are in some kind of, it's definitely control. It's all controlled.
Karen, can I just say something? Like what John was saying before, and Tommy as well. You know, we're seeing the TV, and the TV is totally controlling us, programming, right? And we all know about cartoons. Cartoons are not good for children. For children, I was going to say that, for children. But we have this thing. You know, we were talking about it the other day, Tommy. Gender. About how the Scouts have decided to change the name of the Scouts so it's more acceptable on a grander scale of things, like, you know. And I think this is what's been going on for.
No, they're actually wanting to put girls in the Boy Scouts.
Yeah, exactly. And also, all right, I'm not homophobic, anything. I'm not xenophobic. But I just think there's just too much going on with this PC, you know, political correctness, and they're trying to make things more normal, that everything is, you know, like transgender, or, you know, there's not just male and female bathrooms now, you know, you've got like, dare I say, you know, there's like 5 choices probably. It's ridiculous, you know, and this is like slowly manipulating our minds over time, you know. I mean, you can see the TV programs that they've had. I don't watch TV, but going back a few years now, I think this with like a family that were, well, they weren't mother and father in that sense. They were, you know, same-sex families with children, and, you know, it's kind of, I don't know, they're just kind of changing things up, you know. Even the Bible, like Tommy said, that's getting changed, man. The Lord's Prayer is being changed. Too many things are being slowly, over time, changed, you know. There's so much violence, too much.
Yes, I wonder what it said originally then, Astral.
We're all getting desensitized, aren't we? Like you say, we see murders on TV and we don't think anything about it because, hey, that's just normal. Oh, it's only a film, you know. But you know, it's a scary thought, you know, that these are only films, but we are getting so desensitized by it that it is affecting our society. And like you said, John, it's creating psychopaths, and they are everywhere.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned the Bible, because I had made a note. If I don't, then I forget, especially on these longer chats. But I made a note earlier when you had mentioned something about the English language only being about 500 years old. Of course, it's claimed that the Bible's about 2,000 and some change years old, maybe a little less than 2,000 years old. And people base much of their paradigm around the Bible. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing. But the problem that I have, especially with the King James Bible, and maybe we can get into this, but maybe it's not necessary, but you know, it's written in English, and that it's been translated from, I counted at least 5 different translations, including Old English, which is a completely different thing than English. And there's been a lot of things lost in the translations.
Exactly.
And so while I still identify as a Christian, and I still am a faithful Christian, I do have some serious questions and, yes, doubts about the King James Version Bible. First and foremost, because it was, you know, created by the Holy Roman Empire, which has a track record of being probably the most psychopathic, neurotic, evil entity that one could possibly imagine throughout history. And, you know, we're talking about things like the Inquisition and the Crusades, and, you know, even the things that they do to the cloister nuns, even in fairly modern times, and then the whole scandals with all of the buggery and rape and just awful things, and then the church, you know, systematically going and basically covering that up by moving the preachers around, or the priests around to different districts as opposed to having them prosecuted. So there is just you know, I find it a bigger disservice to the truth to just necessarily go right along with the Bible, even though I still have faith in Jesus Christ. I really do, because I think that there must be some grains of truth in the Bible. But I think that a lot of it is a great deal of pageantry. Um, you know, again, maybe we could get into this, and maybe it's not necessary, but you know, I just find it a huge disservice to necessarily go right along with everything that's in there without looking at the original, frankly, because, and people will say, oh, you don't need to look at the original language. The Bible's the Word of God, the unadulterated Word of God that has provably, demonstrably been adulterated. It's been changed. There are major changes. And so, you know, I just think that it's much better to go to the original sources if you're going to use that as a reference frame. But it does go back to, okay, so what is the English language? This was the whole point that you had raised, that the English language, I think, has a way of confusing our psyche by default. I mean, you have so many words that, like you said, you have cursive writing, you have spelling. All of these are, if you think about it, this is terms that you use in witchcraft. Cursing, curse, I'll put a curse on you. Spelling, I'll put a spell on you. And there's lots of these
John,
examples.
and it doesn't just stop there. I mean, it continues, because I'm pretty sure you'll find links. There are so many synchronicities. One, I'm living in Denmark. To spell in Danish is called stavelse. And if you translate it deliberately or directly, sorry, it means like, it's like you're holding a magic wand in your fingers, you know, a wand. It means
It's
a
the
wand.
same word, isn't it?
Spelling.
Spell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a magic wand.
Yeah, it's crazy. But like, and so the English language, that there, it just seems like there are contradictions, because again, our minds work, and it's really not fully understood, but our minds work like in pictures. So in a lot of cases, we remember things as pictures or images, as opposed to just remembering the word or the letters that comprise the word. Now, of course, there are associations, but I mean, there is something to that. And when you start confusing the language at its very core, and I would mention some examples, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. But there are lots and lots of examples where the words themselves sort of contradict or match up with other completely different thoughts. And then you get into things like the Black's Law Dictionary, which is basically what they call legalese, and what lawyers and corporations and these Sestuit KV sort of ecclesiastical court judicial systems, the words that they're using mean something completely different than what we are led to believe those words mean. So you have yet another layer of this sort of built-in necessary deception for the scheme that they have going on to work, and for people to remain deceived. It's all very cleverly coded and hidden in the language. And again, it seems like the English language itself is coded to keep us a little bit confused about things, or maybe discordant is a better term, where the words themselves don't always necessarily match up to the picture in our mind.
Sorry, can I interrupt there? I heard, this is going back a few years now, the English language had, this is obviously old, but had approximately 800,000 words. This cannot be true, or what? And then I heard
800,000.
yeah, 800,000 words, man. This is going back a few years. And then they were saying that the Danish language has approximately like 300,000 words. You know, and then you start thinking, man, well, all these extra words, you know, and we're basically saying the same things, asking for, you know, can I have milk, can I have bread, can I buy this, whatever, you know, have you got a horse I can borrow, whatever. You know, as mankind, we ask the same things, don't we? I mean, basically, although we've all got different languages, basically, you know, when we say we wake up in the morning, good morning, when we go to bed at night, good night, you know, this kind of thing. So where are these extra words coming
Well,
from?
and think about this too. Something that I do sometimes if I can't sleep is if I'm laying in bed, can't sleep, I'll try to think of words that don't have at least two meanings, because in the English language, most words have lots and lots of different meanings. So like, for example, bat, you know, I'm just thinking of something off the top of my head. Bat. Well, you got a baseball bat, you got a bat with wings, right?
Yeah.
And so the fact that there are so many words that, you know, if that's true, 800,000, then why do we have so many words that are used with multiple meanings? And you could think of them all day long. I mean, like pool. I'm just thinking of things off the top of my head. Pool. You can have a pool of water. You can have a pool table, and there's probably more. But so that's an interesting point. If there's so many words, then why do we have to have words that are used to represent completely different things? Like, wouldn't we have plenty of them to go around for everything?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the other side of it too, right?
But then again, you know, you get, well, take Finnish, for example, the Finnish language. They have, if I'm not wrong in saying this, 13 different types of snow. They have a word for 13 different types of snow. So we can say, oh, it's snowing, right? Or we can say, oh, it's sleet. Or what else can we say? It's, okay, maybe hailstone, but that's not kind of snow, is it? You know? But they have 13 different types of snow, and each one of these snows is, you know, recognizable. They know what you're talking about, and that there just says to me, okay, that's very developed, you know. Finnish is also linked to Romanian, and now this is we're miles apart, you know. It's like, well, how does that work out? They're so far apart, but yet the languages are so very closely linked. You know, it's yeah. I'm just talking about snow anyway, you know, sorry. I was going on there.
Yeah.
All right. There's the other side of things too, right? I just want to say a quick shout out to Marty Leeds, because Marty Leeds has got pi in the alphabet. Your fingers in numerology, they all add up from A to Z, if you can see that, right? Your numbers are all your letters are numbers on your fingers from A to Z, from every joint in your hand. And Marty Leeds has got a great thing about the pi in the English language, right? And I like to see Marty on the show one day. He's awesome, and he does a great thing on Flat Earth as well. And this is where it gets into the esoteric side of the English language, because I think these guys were actually performing witchcraft when they were creating the whole concept of the way we speak the word. The language is even put into numbers on your fingers, which is your 10 digits on your hands, right? And then every joint in your hand makeup is a letter, which comes out from A to M on one side and N to Z on the other, and it's perfect. And it's like a conundrum when you start putting all these things together, because between the numerology and stuff like that, then there's the astrology things that you look at. It's like, these guys who put our wording together were high sorcerers, I do believe, like the old Druids back in the day. They were, and when you mentioned Romania, Astral, that's kind of funny, because Rome is Roma, right? And Romania is Romania, right? Roma, right? And New York City used to be called New Denmark, by the way, Astral. And if you take a look at that, that gets kind of crazy as well. But that's when the Dutch actually had a run on the east coast of North America at one time. But the English language is crazy, and it gets into spellcraft, and these guys know what they're doing, right? And that's about it for now.
Well, it's almost like my research has sort of pointed me in the direction that the English language again was sort of built by elites for the commoners, you know, the common tongue, if you will, and it is sort of designed to keep us, I don't know, to keep us confused or at odds with ourselves, or at, you know, our language is inherently confusing us to some extent, it seems. And it's sort of hard to explain, and it's definitely harder to realize. But if you just look out for that concept in day-to-day life, you may be struck with an aha moment where you understand what I mean. I'm probably not doing this whole idea justice right now, but yeah, I tend to agree that you know, spelling, there may be something to do with that. But when you look at these fraternal orders and the Freemasons and these, even things like the different satanic churches or whatnot, they do a lot of their stuff in Latin, much like the Catholic Church does, right? And so Latin, I don't speak Latin, but you know, I've been told by people who do that it's well, obviously it's the base root for a lot of different languages, including English, as one of its contributors. But Latin, as I'm told, is a little bit more representative. You know, it's a, I don't know, more cut and dried language. It's more definitive than the English language. And so perhaps if we expressed our thoughts in a more simplex language pattern, there's also some interesting stuff about ancient Hebrew, how if you look at the way that the sound waves are displayed visually, when you speak the ancient Hebrew alphabet, the sound waves are displayed, I forget the name of the process, as the actual characters as they are written. So whoever developed that alphabet somehow knew that the spoken letters, when filtered through modern technology, whatever that process is, I don't know how the details work, but those letters are displayed when spoken as the actual written letter. And so maybe, you know, if we were not confined by our language, but instead bolstered or allowed to express ourselves better or more simply, or without confusing issues subconsciously by speaking language that has different associations in our mind with necessarily what it should, if I'm making any sense, then maybe, you know, we would be better off for it. And perhaps that is one of the mechanisms of our control prior to the television, which they've really got us by the balls there, don't they?
Oh, for sure. I was
One thing, oh, sorry to interrupt. One thing that you had mentioned earlier, I had seen a story pretty recently about a school teacher at an all-girls school who was fired and character assassinated in the mainstream because, again, this is an all-girls school, and when the school day started, they said, "All right, girls, let's get started." One of the students identified as a little boy, even though they were born as a little girl. And so, yeah, this whole political correctness thing has just gotten so off the rails. You know, that's really what people are going to make us think about when the government is going around bombing the shit out of people for no reason. That's really what they're going to get up in arms about, is things like that. I mean, this world is just absurd. It really is.
No, I hear you, brother. And I was under the understanding that the English language basically or the Latin came from Paleo Hebrew first, then it turned to Latin, and then from Latin, our English language, it went to Greek, and then from Greek, we kind of transpired it into the English language. And I think it is a kind of a conundrum that these guys they know stuff that we don't know, and I think it's not fair. And I think well, I guess if you're got enough gumption yourself to go out and try and relearn. I'm kind of a big language kind of guy because I've had several different kinds of people working for me in the past. I had 13 Russian guys working for me one time, and I learned a lot of Russian there. So, and then I also worked in some places where I learned to speak Bangi, that's Indian, and I know how to speak a little Punjabi because I had some friends that are from Pakistan, and I did a lot of work with some Pakistan people that were Punjabs. And so I'm really interested in languages, and I'm kind of interested in everything, to be honest with you. But I mean, I take everything apart and I try and rebuild it. And I guess if you want to take the time to learn all these languages and stuff, I think it's a good thing. But I mean, I'm 56 years old in a couple of days, and I've been doing this for so long. I mean, my eyes are starting to burn out of my head. I spend about 18 hours a day doing this for now because I'm not working. I just quit my job in the last fall, and I just getting over the winter. And I'm just no rush at 56 years old to get back at it again, right? And I like doing what I'm doing. I got a couple of bucks to keep me going.
Happy birthday in a couple of days, then, Tommy.
What's that, dear?
Happy birthday for a couple of days' time, then, Tommy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, I like researching this stuff, and I find, the English language is really a mystery. And then, especially, I was talking with James Mason a few times about, how the consciousness is actually affected by the way we actually even say these words, and it keeps us living in states of anxiety and stuff. And I liked my conversations with James. He's a good man, and he's clever. He knows what's going on. But the thing is, I'm more into the actual dynamics of how these because I'm into this esoteric side of things, because I read stuff like H.P. Lovecraft too. I got a lot of Peter Levenda here. I got some esoteric books. I got some occult books. Just because I find it kind of interesting. I kind of like to know what's going on around me. It's funny because I can go out in public and I can look at a street sign and I know what it means to the general public, but I know what it also means upside down, right? And most people don't even look at things like this. I see advertising things in the subway and stuff, and I see certain numbers and I know what they mean, but the people who are the average Joe, they don't see it. But in subconsciously, these people do see it, right? And this is where it gets into the anxiety of things and how the English language is broken down, and how these guys who put this all together, it's almost like they must have had computer technology to put this stuff, because I mean, this stuff it's so beyond amazing at times. Because like you look at the Hebrew language, because I also my last school was actually a Jewish academy here in Toronto that I went to for a year, and I live in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood. I got a lot of Jewish friends, but I mean, I'm not, these guys are young and they're cool. I mean, they're not like, they're not black hats or nothing like that. I mean, they got black hat relatives, I'm sure, and I know they do. But I mean, it's just that the Hebrew language itself too is another thing, because I study some of that as well. And, like even the monster pop cans, the logo on Monster is 666 in the Hebrew language. And it's amazing how the advertising people use this kind of subliminal hits on you, and with the newspapers, the TVs, and then you got your radio stations and stuff like that. The people who are behind the music. That if you check in with Crosby, Stills and Nash, and they did an interview, and they said that every album before it went into print went to a studio where there was like 13 warlocks and witches.
That's Johnny Todd.
They did a spell. Apparently, they did all these spells all the time on every album that was produced that came out of the album industry. And same with the tattoo ink. If you get tattoos, apparently there's spells put on these tattoo inks as well to follow the ink to where. Same with the music. The music, wherever you follow it, the demons that are put into the music will follow the music to every home that's played in. It's creepy stuff, right? And it gets into like the wording and spellcraft, and it's just like, so I kind of like to know my enemy, and it's kind of like I'm with you on the Christianity aspect. I'm not 110% King James Bible, because I know I got the F Sefer here. There's it's got the Book of Enoch in there and everything. I've got all kinds of different types of Bibles here. I've got the Quran. See, in the Quran, Jesus Christ's name is mentioned 25 times and Muhammad only 4 times. And the Muslims are actually waiting for the return of Yeshua, or Jesus, they've actually got a temple built in the side of the mountain off of Mecca there for his return. So this gets kind of crazy, because if these guys are doing it, and I hear that I know some Freemasons and stuff like that. I've been asked twice to be one, and I refuse to be involved with that kind of stuff. But I mean, I can't refuse to have friends. And some of the friends that I went in high school with, they're Freemasons today. And I can't just say, hey, buddy, you're not my friend anymore because you're a Freemason. I just, it's like, what do you do, right?
Right.
But like, it's just the whole thing that we're involved with here is it's a fathom to the brain sometimes. And you know what? The biggest problem with most people is they're just living in their happy-go-lucky little paradigm. And if you walk in, like my brothers, man, God love them, right? They got nice big homes, the pools in the backyards, the wives with good jobs, the SUVs in the driveway, the whole bit. Me, I live in an apartment in Southside Juville here in Toronto, and these guys got, they're in Toronto too, but if I go into their homes, or not just my brothers, but anybody, they got themselves in a little bubble, and it's a happy little paradigm. I walk in there and I'm a pin, and I start poking holes in their paradigm, and they don't like me ruining their little happy-go-lucky life. That's when reality kicks in, and they can't handle it. And the last time I talked to my brothers was just before Christmas. So, I mean, it's just like, they haven't called me because they live in fear,
Well,
and if I speak to them, even if I mention the sodium fluoride in the drinking water, or how Toronto city water is recycled and you're literally drinking shit water, right? And that's why I got distilled water. My dog even drinks distilled water. I don't know. I haven't drank tap water in 5 or 6 years now, and that was only because I had to have a coffee in a shop with a buddy. And this stuff is poison. There's a 32-mile lake here. I can go down there tonight. I can see the lights across the way, by the way, which I shouldn't be able to see according to the curvature of the globe, right? But I can see the houses across the harbor, or across Lake Ontario, and I can see boats going back and forth. Yet I know it's only 32 miles across, but how can I see the other side of the shore? But it's 32 miles across. It's 300 miles long. It's fresh water. And Toronto is such an up-to-date, yuppie little community. We got to recycle our own drinking water because we're so cool, right? You got to be kidding me. You know what that does to the human body when you recycle your own feces into your system? Let alone, I know guys that change transmissions over manholes because they just don't want to get with that. Or I know some guys who dump an industrial product
well,
in
of
the
course,
manholes
if they
because they don't want to pay for
did that,
disposal.
I was going to say, if they did that, then they wouldn't be able to have Nestle pump out the lakes and sell the water back to you for 3,000,000% profit or whatever.
Well, I think they got a bagging system too, where they're hauling these the freshwater lakes over to China, right? From the West Coast, right? And they got
Yeah.
these big tankers that these bags of water they're submerged underwater, and they tow these bags of water all the way over to China, right? And apparently it's because Canada owes so many dollars because we didn't pay for our Walmart underwear, right? And as part of our debt, right? You got me. I don't know how the hell Canada can be in debt anyway, because there's 32 or 36 million people here. Most people are busting their ass just trying to survive, and they're buying a bunch of garbage, plastic stuff that breaks 10 minutes after you buy it, right? It's all made in China, right? And everybody thinks the Nazis lost World War II, right? I mean, I can go. Don't get me going on that.
Yeah, but the ideology definitely survived, and it is alive and well here in America for sure. And pretty much any country out there that isn't conforming or hasn't already conformed to the Western dollar, when it all boils down to it, they're targeted as enemies, right? So the pretty much the whole world is following suit with this ideology, this governmental ideology that is totally destructive and totally anti-human and really quite psychopathic, right? I mean, that's the only way you could put it. The actions of the powers that ought not be. You'd mentioned earlier Freemasons, which is a topic that comes up a lot in these discussions. And everybody, I'm not a Freemason. I don't know many. A lot of people that I went to school with that I've caught up with on Facebook. There's a couple of them that are Freemasons. Whatever. Most of these guys make it to the third degree, which is the Blue Lodge. It's the underlings, the neophytes. Right? Most Freemasons only ever make it to Master Mason, which is the third degree, the Blue Lodge, and very, very few of them, relatively speaking, make it above that level, and only very few make it up to that 32nd, 33rd degree. And it seems like, based on what I've researched, the Freemasons, they're misled into believing a false version of what the Freemasons at the top actually believe. But they are also at that point misled to believe that they know exactly what the guys at the top believe and what they aspire to and what their moral code is and all that sort of stuff. And so it is a little bit irresponsible to go and blanket statement all Freemasons as these evil, nefarious characters, which the ones at the top very well may be, because the ones at the bottom are specifically set up as essentially stooges. Yeah, well, stooges in a sense, because they can attest, even though they do take secret vows right at the beginning, blood vows, where they agree to be slaughtered, killed in all sorts of ways to varying degrees as they go up and level up. They take blood oaths not to reveal any of the lodge secrets. But if you've got a friend that's a Freemason and you talk to them, they will attest that no, it's a philanthropic organization. We pay monthly dues, yes, but we also get benefits, we get contracts, we get connections, networking with very, rich and successful and powerful people. And so it is a wise choice in this modern age to be a part of something like that. And most of these people do not see anything wrong with it because, yeah, it might be a little bit weird taking blood oaths, but they're not doing anything wrong, and everybody's happy for it. Nobody's getting hurt. But what a lot of people have attested to is when you get it up to the higher levels and you learn what's actually going on, and you may not even get to really know that until you get up to the very top levels, which most people do not do. That they realize all sorts of strange things, like they worship Jabulon and whatever. It gets pretty bizarre, but yeah, I just think the point is that you really cannot, in good conscience, blanket label all Freemasons as nefarious. And a lot of people do that in the truth community, and it's almost like that there is a bit of a good deal of stigma behind the term Freemason. And so if you label someone, or if someone is indeed a Freemason, it's almost instantly an admission of guilt. But we can't necessarily do that. I think that the Freemasons probably do recruit psychopaths through their organization. There's good evidence to support that, and put them in key positions that, frankly, most normal people in good conscience would never be able to do, and keep their mouth shut about for any substantial amount of time. But perhaps there are a lot of psychopaths in there. You had also mentioned the whole idea of subconscious mind control programming by the governments through the televisions, and that's another thing that I've looked into a good deal, and think that there's good evidence to support it. It is, all these frightening things, but at the end of the day, it seems like the best antidote for all of this crazy stuff is just simply the truth, right? So hopefully that has a good chance to keep going, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. This buddy of mine that I was talking, well, there's a couple of buddies I got, but the one in particular, he was one of my best friends in high school, and he's been working for the Toronto Transit Commission for about 25 years now. And I know his father-in-law got him into the TTC back in the day, and his father-in-law is a Freemason. And these guys are they like going in the backyard and barbecuing and having a few beers, and they might go to the lodge once a month kind of thing. Yeah, exactly what you're saying. These guys are like, top tier they get is about 3. I know the Freemasons are all, you know, departmentalized like 101. You know, I do believe my uncle was a Freemason. He worked for Rolls-Royce. He designed the engines for the L-1011. He was an aircraft engineer. He worked for Lockheed McDonald. He worked for them all, right? I believe he was a high-ranking Freemason. I think my cousin's a Freemason. He's a helicopter engineer right now in Seattle. He works for Rolls-Royce. I mean, I think when you get these jobs, and when you're like in an engineering position, or like, see, my buddy who was in high school, he's a civil engineer, and he's a Freemason, right? And I know he's a family guy. He's got 2 daughters. His wife's got some diabetes issues and with her weight and stuff like that. He's a decent guy. He's a family man. There's nothing esoteric about this guy whatsoever. I've kind of flat-bombed him too, right? I hadn't seen him in a few years. Actually, I hadn't seen him in about 5 years. And I was telling him about how it was only the Freemasons that have been to space and this kind of stuff, right? And he didn't even catch on to it, right? And I kind of shocked him with some of the information that I was telling him about the Freemasons that he didn't even know, right? And so you're 110% correct on, like, you can't just take every Freemason and throw them out with the bathwater, right? You know, it's just, it can't happen that way, because it's just like in the churches. 90% of the Roman Catholic Church, they just go in there, just pray to God on Sunday and go home, right? They don't know what's going on between the priests, you know, taking kids in the back and having their way with them and stuff like this, and how world renowned it is, and then they just being all
Yeah, they
held
pray.
back by
The church preys on their good nature. Yeah.
Well, see, this is where I look at the King James Bible. When you're saying, well, you know, where is all this shit coming from? You're going ding, 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 ding. All roads lead to Rome. You know what? All this anxiety, all these wars, all this stuff. You better take a look at those black popes. Peter Hans Kovenbach, he just died. But you got Adolfo Nicholas, and then you got the new guy, Adolfo Sozo, the black popes, right? These guys are all involved with the actual deep line blood families, like the Orsinis, the Farneses, the Aldebrandinis, the Farneses, the whole bunch. There's the Contis. There's about 13 or 14 of those old Roman families that came back from the old days, and they didn't actually just die off and, you know, fall off into the wind like, you know, just some dust, right? These families moved into Switzerland, and this is where you can't, you know, Switzerland's been in no. They say that Switzerland. Well, first of all, Switzerland, its wording itself means sisters of Isis, right? And so there's more tombstones that are obelisks, and there's so much Egyptian architecture in Switzerland today. There's that show. I mean, you probably checked this guy out before, but it's called the Pharaoh Channel, right? And this guy, he's a guy from Germany, and he takes you for a tour around all of Switzerland. He's telling you about all these pharaonic families, and he's saying, look, you know, these guys didn't die, and they're just up here now, right? Anyway, the guys who wrote the Bible are the guys who put us in the state we're in today. It's the Jesuits, the Roman Catholic Church, these guys that came out of the box. You know, they're Luciferians. You know, they got the new little thing on the side that, if you take a look at the St. Peter's Basilica from a 45-degree angle from the sky view, it's a pregnant serpent, and it's crowned to boot. And the sidewalk out front of it is actually a snake's tongue, and all the cobblestone that's inside the courtyard is made to look out like a snake skin. These are like reptile worshippers, right? Make us creepy, but all roads lead to Rome. And I'm with you on all the TV and the anxiety and stuff, but I think the Freemasons, they get a bad deal too, because like I know some good Freemasons, and they don't even know, like, they're just normal people. 9 days out of 10, they're not even a Freemason. Sometimes some of the guys I know that are Freemasons don't even know they're Freemasons. They haven't been to a lodge in 3 or 5 years. You know,
Yeah.
just like that, right?
What something interesting that I came across is that one of the top 10 careers where you find the most psychopaths, one of them was a priest. So like priest is a profession, or a life role where you will find a higher representation of psychopaths by hundreds of percents. It's much more likely. Another one, I think the first one was CEO, which makes a lot of sense. Some interesting ones. Surgeons are a lot of them are psychopathic. You kind of have to be. There's a really, really good book I would recommend. I'm listening to it, audiobook. It's about 8 hours long. It's on YouTube. It's called The Wisdom of Psychopaths. I don't necessarily agree with it in terms of where it's going philosophically, I don't think. But it is a really good book. Again, it's called The Wisdom of Psychopaths. And basically, they're celebrating psychopaths because they have the ability. So, like, for example, for a surgeon, when they get into a situation where most people would sort of freak out a little bit and be very anxious about the consequences, none of that stuff affects them. Their heart rate actually slows down and their brain goes more into a theta state when they're faced with challenges, and they focus solely on that challenge and have no sort of care for the consequences at all. And so that does make them good surgeons. And so there's an argument, or like the bomb squad, or like a bomb squad or something like that. So there's an argument that psychopaths are necessary for society to survive, in a sense, because you need someone that's going to run into that burning building without thinking twice about it, right? But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. But the book makes a pretty good case for it. There's really, really interesting stuff in there. One of the things that caught my attention was Ted Bundy. One of the things he said during interviews before he was executed was he could pick out a good victim by the way that they walked. So a clinical, or maybe it was a forensic psychologist, did a study where, and I probably won't get the details right, so I won't even attempt, but they basically screened people for higher levels of this, checklist. It's the Hare's psychopathy checklist. People that scored higher on that could pick out people, girls, just by the way that they walked, without knowing them, girls who had been sort of routinely victimized throughout their life, at least once or twice, or been in relationships where they were victimized or whatever. The people who scored higher for psychopathy were able to pick out, just by looking at their gait of their walk, who would be the better victim. So this claim by Ted Bundy was correct. Yeah, there's lots of really weird things like that. And if you've ever encountered a psychopath, people will say that they're, being in their presence sort of gives them chills. Your intuition is kicked off that there's something not right or predatory or evil about this person. And on the flip side, it appears that psychopaths have sort of built-in radar where they can pick up on people's weaknesses, or if they are the 1 out of 3 holding the $100 that the student would actually get to keep if they fooled the person, they would get that sort of thing right more often than people that did not score higher, right, for psychopathy. So it's almost as if these people have completely different qualities and makeups of personality than what we would consider normal. And not all of them are necessarily going to go out and murder a bunch of people like Ted Bundy or whatever. You've got apparently lots of successful or functioning psychopaths. And frankly, I think that the estimates that they give are very underrated because they're so, I mean, I guess it's done by clinical research that it's 1%, 1 to 2%, up to 4% of the population is either psychopathic or sociopathic. And, I think that number is probably a lot higher because especially the psychopaths are just so damn hard to spot. Like they can literally fool people for years I just actually watched something today. It was a couple hours long, and I don't necessarily agree with everything that this guy's saying, but it's called Surviving Marriage with Medusa or something. This guy was allegedly married to a psychopath for like 4.5 years. And, you know, this guy had lots of friends that were psychologists and stuff and knew this woman very well. And apparently, you know, she ended up being a psychopath and fooled all of them for years. And these are people who, you know, apparently know how to look out for it. So she had them all fooled, allegedly, if what everything this guy's saying is true. And I don't know. I like to hear both sides of the story before I agree with it. But it's an interesting thing. But if you apply this to the larger scope, if they really are so good at hiding in plain sight because they look just like us, right? But they're frankly, you can't really call them human because they, in a lot of ways, they'll do things or behave in a way that most people that what you consider normal or socially acceptable would never do. And they do it without even thinking twice about it just because they can. And it,
Hey, John,
you know,
John, in the chat room, Racer FE, he just wanted to know what led you to read about this.
you know, well, you start thinking about who, because there's a big question like who would keep this deception going? You know, even things like 9/11. If you know the official story, and I don't want to get too much into it because I don't want to get anybody in trouble. But if you look at things like that, there has to be somebody behind it, right? If what our hypotheses are leaning toward is true, and who would ever make these sort of decisions? And the only thing that I could answer to that is somebody who has absolutely no care whatsoever for the consequences of their actions, no ability to experience empathy, care about another person, care about the world, care about the future for their grandchildren, whatever. They would have no ability to care whatsoever about any of that stuff. And the only thing in reality that I could point to based on my very limited research is psychopaths, right? Because, and again, I think that that's probably way more believable than reptilians from the constellation Draco, right? But who knows? Yeah, so that's sort of what led me down that line of thought is, okay, well, there does appear to be some degree of truth and plausibility to this. And the more that I look into it, it makes a lot of sense. I like, you know, the way that I've sort of built my post flat earth philosophy after re-questioning as many things as I can is I like to go with the simplest answers that answer the most things at once, right? And things that we can demonstrate. I don't like to go with necessary theory or necessarily theory. I mean, that's fun and it will lead us to answers, but at the same time, I don't think it's a good idea to get entrenched in theory because if you start having to defend theoretical stuff, then we're just as bad as the Globers. And so I like the simplest possible answers that explain the most things all at once, just like Flat Earth does. And I think that so too, the idea of psychopathy. Now, again, there is a big question as to what exactly is psychopathy, because you definitely have antisocial or you know, sociopathic qualities in a psychopath, but there's a big difference and there's a distinction. The psychopaths having absolutely no ability to feel remorse, the want to harm people, almost like a vampirism where they want to build up relationships with people and then crash those relationships down. And one theory is that they're actually feeding off of that lost energy, almost like a vampire. I don't know. Maybe they can somehow vicariously experience that person's emotions by causing the roller coaster of emotions that they're going through. I mean, maybe that's one of the ways that you could explain their motive. But it just appears that they are doing, you know, they're doing things for the want to hurt others, absolutely no ability to feel remorse for it. Again, not all of them are necessarily going to go and hack people up, but if the situation presents itself where that's what's necessary, they'll do it without thinking twice, because anything that they do is going to be for their own self-aggrandizement and survival, and they will do so without thinking twice about harming others. So it just answers so many questions, at once, and it's something that could be tested for. I mean, I bet you if you were to look at the people responsible for a lot of the bullshittery with NASA and the moon landings and the Apollo missions, you'd find probably a good deal of psychopaths, but that's just a hunch.
Yeah, it's good. I know what
Yeah.
you're saying about psychopaths.
Oh, sorry, you go, Tommy. It's okay, you go.
Yeah, it's funny you're talking about psychopaths today, because I'm looking at psychopaths too. I've always looked at these creeps, but I mean, right now I'm looking at this guy born in Washington, D.C. in 1870. His name's Albert Fish. He claims to have eaten 400 children in 1 year. He's a serial killer. They executed him. He was the werewolf of Mazine or something. They also called him the Brooklyn Vampire, the Boogeyman. He was the werewolf of Wisteria, the Gray Man. They executed him on January 16th, I think, in 1936. He was cause of death was electrocution, right? This guy's born right in Washington, D.C., and he went on a rampage across the country, and he was on a rampage for years, right? And he claimed he openly admitted to eating 400 children 1 year. That's a psychopath.
That's just disgusting. That is crazy.
Well, this is a guy. Because it's funny. I just had to take, because as soon as you said psychopath, I said, "Oh man, this is crazy." I know the guy you want to talk about, because you mentioned Ted Bundy, right? He's a serial killer, right? I think this guy's got him beat by far, right?
Yeah, I've recognized the name, but I haven't looked into him. I may have seen something about him a while back, long time ago, maybe like a little mini documentary or something. But other than that, yeah, I'm not fresh up on him.
Yeah, he's famous for these prairie ghosts, right? He's notorious, right? And that's just one of them. And he's not just the only guy. This has been going on for a long time, my friend, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I just think that there may be something to the ability, because what it seems, in terms of like mind manipulation through the television, and again, this is theoretical. I'm not saying that that's what creates a psychopath. What I'm saying is it may be possible for them to tune up the psychopathic tendencies of a person to the degree where it may push someone over the edge, whether that's temporarily or permanently. Who knows? Who's to say? Because some people, even the famous, infamous serial killers and such, some of them report hearing voices in their head, which is common with schizophrenics and psychopaths. But if there is some percentage of them that are actually, because there is a running theory that has good evidence to support it, of again things like Manchurian candidates, where you've got government funded underground, black budget programs that are producing people, spies or super soldiers, who have the ability to carry out missions under one personality and then shut that personality off if they're captured, where they'll either kill themselves or they will have no recognition in that personality whatsoever of what was done by the other personality. And so, I'm not saying that because there are obviously going to be natural cases for this, but what I am saying is that it may be possible for them to tune this on a mass level by the flicker rate in the television. I mean, who really knows? I mean, that is a little bit conspiratorial there, but what makes up your psyche or whatever? There's 5 elements that are both on sort of a 360-degree scale. That's sort of like the color rainbow, the color spectrum, where you've got like ultraviolet to whatever, the red or whatever, infrared. and that, they both meet to where, you've got them right next to each other in a circle. So you've got like a speedometer, right? And each one of these 5 things has its own speedometer. And if they're all tuned up to the right extent, then you get a psychopath, right? And I forget what the 5 things are, but they're basically the big 5. And people can look into this. But yeah, I think it's totally possible that because they do understand the human mind very well, it's possible that they would know how to artificially tune that. It is totally possible through the mind control device that is the television. And I'm not saying that is what's going on, but it's possible. And even the content itself is shown to be
It's quite
a
horrible.
weapon. It's a weapon. It's been weaponized. And
It's
so
all
even
quite
if you follow along with the content itself, this is totally independent of the actual cathode ray tube in the past and the flicker rate or whatever the delivery mechanism is. Ignoring that and just following that in a altered state of consciousness where your mind's natural ability to defend itself against outside thoughts just creeping in and becoming your own is sort of shut down. And that's done by the temporary suspension of disbelief alone. So when you're into that storyline, you're open to attack by theories or ideas that are not your own. There's a big reason why corporations spend millions of dollars for 30 seconds of airtime on the Super Bowl. It's not because they're doing it for fun. They're doing it because they want to get into the most amount of people's heads to the highest degree. And so when you are totally absorbed in a program and you're in that alpha state, you're highly susceptible to suggestion. And so that alone is enough to completely, especially when you're dealing with young audience who just totally veg out on this idiot box for so many hours every single day. You must admit that that's a very dangerous thing, especially when you start to consider who's running the show in the big picture here. And there's some pretty nefarious, at least plausibly psychopathic people that are in charge of the, what is it, 3 or 4 companies that own all of the mass media. The hundreds and hundreds of mass media outlets are owned by 4 companies. It's like, I think one of them's Time Warner. Maybe that's not even a thing anymore. But you got Disney's a big one. There's 3, 4, or 5, however many companies own all of those. And if they have the ability, and we invite them into your homes, Disney's a really big one.
Yeah.
Invite them into your children's heads. That's a very bad thing. And then when you add to that the whole idea of the flicker rate, our minds operate on a frequency, and if they have the ability to interfere with the natural frequencies of our brainwave patterns, which it appears that's what's going on with the television, and even the monitors that we're all looking at. It's just something that we might not want to veg out on for 10 hours every day. That's all I'm saying.
Can I
Especially
say
not,
something?
for children. Yeah.
It's all changed now. The flicker rate on a TV used to be 50 hertz, didn't it? 50 cycles. Is it 50 cycles per second? And we're seeing it now at 100 cycles per second. The thing is this: we're seeing TV in a much higher definition, right? But I believe within those lines of definition, there is, this subliminal messaging that's been hidden from us. I'm sure of it, because why would we have that flicker rate so high? Our eyes can't, we can't determine it, if you understand what I mean. We can't see it. Subconsciously, yeah, we do. But while we're looking at it, we're not seeing it. I mean, if you was to freeze frame, certain films and things where they've had these subliminals, you can find them, you can see them, you know, and for sure they've been doing them for years. But what I'm thinking is, why do we have this high flicker rate? You know, why did they set it up so high? It's 100 now, isn't it? Maybe it's 200 hertz. I don't know. I mean, I don't watch TV. Mine's old, so I mean, yeah.
And you know, to answer that question as well, I think what sort of just this is in retrospect, what subconsciously led me to look into psychopaths is I was reminded the other day the whole rolling out of the 5G wireless. So instead of 4G Wi-Fi, they're upgrading to 5G, which is ultra high frequency. It's like goes down to millimeter wavelengths, which are very high frequency, like 60 gigahertz. But they don't go very far. So they're going to be setting up these little mini, not towers, but they're not towers. Maybe they'll build some towers, but they're going to put them on existing infrastructure, fast tracking it actually.
Yeah, well, can I just say something?
Yeah.
I live in like an apartment complex, you know, it's there 1, 2, 3, 4 stories. I live in the ground floor. But the building across from me, they don't have one, but the building behind that, they have on the roof one of these little antennas with, 6, 9, God knows how many little triangular, whatever they are, on them, and they're popping up all over the place. I mean, I can walk down the street, I could probably find 10 within half an hour walk easily, just by looking to my left and to my right. So yeah, there's something going on there with the 5G, and I know we have 5G here in Denmark. It's there now.
Well, I think I think it's going to have some pretty big problems. I mean, it's going to cause some pretty big problems. And they're not even the FCC, the guys that are supposed to be looking out for the people and making sure that, well, the communications companies and such don't get completely out of line and protect us from them. They're supposed to represent us for, with these corporations, and instead, they're making decisions to fast track this technology without studying the long-term effects, even though we don't even understand how bad the regular Wi-Fi is affecting us, because it's radiation, and it's frankly not tested at the levels and the constant exposure. The government regulations are just totally inadequate. They're completely in bed with the corporations, and this is to further their entire infrastructure, which is used, to our benefit, sure, to some degrees, but also, apparently against our civil rights. And it's a little bit frightening, but what can you do? You can't stop them from doing it. So how many people have to die before they change it? Looking at the track record, once they put something like that up, they're not going to change it, no matter how many people are adversely affected by it. So that's what got me thinking about, well, who in the hell would allow this sort of thing? Who in their right mind that has to live in that country would do that? And I think a bunch of psychopaths would. That's the only thing I can think. Yeah.
What's your take on demons and parasitic mind invasion? Right?
I think that the two go very much hand in hand.
Yeah.
Because what's interesting is you get a situation where when psychopaths are allowed to, or when they flourish, when their plans come to fruition, and we're not talking about hacking people up, what they do is I wouldn't say that psychopathy is contagious, but they actually manipulate people into doing things that they wouldn't normally do for some sort of gratitude in a relationship with the psychopath. And you get these sort of secondary sort of minions or flying monkeys that are created in social situations around psychopaths who basically work people. I mean, look at cults like, where we get the phrase "drink the Kool-Aid." Who was that? I want to say Jim Jones. Is that right?
Yep.
Maybe not. Yeah. I mean, when you look at people like that, for whatever reason, some people have this just ability to first identify good, easy targets, and then hone in on them, manipulate them into behavior that they just absolutely would not normally do. And you get a situation where you get sort of a secondary minion of the psychopath. So I'm not sure how I got off on that tangent, but what was the question?
No, I just mentioned about the demons and the mind parasites and
Oh yeah.
stuff, and because I believe some people actually do get possessed by things, and it gets involved with poltergeists and stuff, weird things like that, right? There's a lot of guys that are I'm not going to boast on these Roman Catholic guys that are out there doing exorcisms, but I mean, I've seen some pretty strange things on the internet alone, which is kind of, you hit and miss, because you can't believe everything you see on the internet, right? I take what I can out of it, but I mean, I also gotta, I take it apart too. I mean, it's just, you can't take everything for a grain of salt with that. But I mean, I take a look at people sometimes, and even when I'm walking in public in Toronto here, and I see people that are like, they're not all home. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, man, I don't think that's the influence of a medication they're on. These people have got this look in their eyes, like they're possessed by something, right? I mean, I was downtown today, and I was by Old City Hall, and this guy walked by me, and he picks up there was a spring water on the ground that was half drank, and then someone put the cap back on. He picks it up, he pours the water out almost right on these two ladies in front of him, right? And these are office types. He walks a couple of feet up there. He picks a beer bottle up out of the grate. He smashes the beer bottle right on the street, right? He turns around and he looks at us like this really creepy, freaky look, right? And then he just carries on. He's got his pants hanging around, down around his belt's hanging around his knees, right? And he looked like he was like, either he was high on methamphetamine times 10, or this guy was possessed by a demon. And I see these people all the time. Like, I mean, like I live downtown Toronto, so it's kind of hard not to get away from these people, right? You got ketamine addicts around here, and it's people are so spaced out, right? And I just wonder sometimes if it's
ketamine, really?
Oh, these people, yeah, they're doing all kinds of Special K, right? They're doing it down there on Spadina Avenue and behind in the alleys, right? And that's Chinatown, right? And it's crazy in this city, and I just see this stuff going on. And half the time, I got to look at these people, and I got to openly admit to myself, it's got to be some sort of a demonic or a mind parasitic invasion, and it gets a poltergeist kind of thing, where it's creepy. I mean, I studied witchcraft and this kind of stuff for a long time. I've been doing it for about 25, 30 years, probably. I don't know how long, right? Just off and on. I'm on my third book collection now. Right? I've had to move around a bit. I got a couple ex-wives in my day, and I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. And I got to admit, I mean, let alone is the TV influencing the people, but I think, with the food, they got everybody under a bloody spell. And then they got everybody living in a daydream, living on a ball, traveling through space at 66.6 thousand miles a minute, and all this kind of fun stuff. And they got a sun that's 98 million miles away. Meanwhile, the stuff's on the other side of the clouds, right? The sun and the moon are the exact same size, just because they're 400 times the distance of the far. So this whole makeup of the mathematics of this whole shit show they got everybody living in is just ridiculous, right?
Yeah. Can I say something, Tommy?
And then you try and talk to people in a level head, and like it's just, you're firing rubber bullets at them, right? I mean, they're looking at you like you're an idiot, right? Sometimes I bang my head and go, like, where am I? And then I turn around and I see a guy smashing a beer bottle and pouring water in front of a couple of nice ladies and stuff like that. It's just acting like a total, like
Can I
an
say
animal
something,
on the
Tommy,
street.
please?
Yeah, it's all right, bro. Go ahead, bro.
Yeah, you see this guy throwing a beer bottle and smashing it on the thing, and then first thing that came to mind there was like acting like animals, but it's actually the contrary, because they're not acting like animals. And if you think about it, that's where we differ from animals, because when have you ever seen a psychopath? I should rephrase that. animals are by nature not like we are as humans, are they not? You know, we differ so greatly. I mean, I think that's the problem. We have lost our connection with nature. You know, I think that's the main thing. We're going around. We're not acting like animals. We're acting like John said, psychopaths. You know,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right on, John.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that, you know, we lost our touch with nature. I mean, you see animals, they all seem to, you know, go along together in nice little packs, nice little herds, whatever, you know, you see a herd of cattle. I mean, even at night time, deer can walk through the forest. I mean, all right, they see, but they must be following, like, you know, these energy lines. There's these old ancient paths through jungles and things. I mean, how do they know where to go? I mean, it's like, yeah, it's just, and they've been following the same lines for, you know, decennia, thousands of years even, you know. It's just, I think that's where we are. We are totally distracted from nature, and that's where we need to get back to, you know. I think that's what we need to do. That's my take anyway.
Yeah, I try and get out to nature every day with this guy here, right? He keeps me in check. I live with my dog, right?
Oh, it's
He's half
beautiful.
wolf, he's half German Shepherd, right? He never bark. He howls at the fire truck, right? He keeps me back to nature, brother. Right? He's cool, right? Aren't you?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, but most people, the majority of people this day, never their bare feet never touch the ground, like for years and years and years at a time, unless you go to the beach a lot or something like that. Most people, especially those who live in cities, you know, it's just not practical. There's not a whole lot of opportunities that present themselves in day-to-day life.
Here's one for you. Here's one for you, John. I go for a walk, you know, as much as I can, like, you know, a good couple of hours every day anyway. And today, it's no exception. And I found mole hills. So I put my feet in these mole hills and stood there for a few minutes. That's nice. And if you haven't tried it, you should try it, you know. And they're fresh, you know, and it's beautiful soft soil, and it's just, yeah, it's fun.
What do the moles do?
They've probably
They're long gone. They're long gone. They've eaten some worms and they're long gone, you know.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta, it's good. You got to get outside, and you need your sunshine too, right?
Yeah, and we need the negative ions from the ground. We do need them. They don't teach us that one, do they?
Yeah, it seems like being grounded, there's something to it electrically. But then, yeah, sunlight, when it hits your skin, creates your body creates vitamin D, which is really important. Yeah, we don't get out as much as we should, I don't think. At least speaking for myself.
Yeah, well, my dog helps me get out because he's not the kind of dog. I just don't take him down the corner and back, right? I got to take him out for an hour walk every time because he's the kind of dog that needs to run, and I got to take him out in the woods, and you got to communicate with his other dog buddies and stuff. I take him to the dog park. Sometimes there's dog walkers there, and there's 100 dogs there, right? And he's just in his doggy heaven. I sit up on the hill and I smoke a cigarette, if you know what I mean. And I just got my chair and I got my jug of water and I take a book and I got my tunes with me, and I'm out there like I spend a lot of time outside with him because he keeps me healthy, and it's I got to take him out twice a day. So like I said, it's like a minimum of half an hour each walk. I usually take him out. Sometimes I take him out for 2 and 3 hour walks. Just it's good for me and him to be together, and he teaches me a lot. He's a flat earth dog, and I learn a lot from him, man. He's totally cool, right? That's Odin. Odin is Thor's daddy. You know Thor with the big hammer, right? He's the Celtic wolf god, right? That's Odin. He's 5 years old, right? He's all dog. He's not neutered or nothing. So sometimes he gets me in trouble with the dog part, right? But no, he's a good dog, and he gets me outside. And I think if you got problems getting outside, you got the ability to have a pet that can, keep you company.
Oh no, it's not getting outside. Like, I work semi outside. There's no air conditioning, so that definitely counts in Florida. But no, I mean, like, I guess getting out. No, actually, I was out in bare feet just today.
Good.
Yeah, walking Lily, little shits a cockapoo. I call her a butt mutt.
Oh, they're cool. But yeah, like it's good to have a dog. Like I don't know. I got my grandfather. I got my son and my daughter. They're in Nova Scotia now, right? I'm living in Toronto. I don't. I kind of painted myself into a corner because I don't have too many friends that I actually get together with much, right? Because most people I get involved with, they're globies, and either they can't handle what I got to say, or I don't want to be around them because they just talk foolish, right? And so it's tough. And I kind of painted myself into my own corner, but sometimes I'm pretty cool with that. And the dog helps me out, right? He's a good dog, and like I said, he's a flat Earth dog, and he's good because sometimes he helps me. Sometimes he helps me introduce me to people, and that's when I get a chance to flap on him. Well, not flap on him. I just start talking about just eventually, like there's a couple of people that I've met with my dog a couple of times, and they certainly feel pretty comfortable with me. And I've talked about, I start small with things about fluoride in the water, and how the city water is recycled, and it's best to probably even just stop at the shop down the road and get distilled water and drink that. It's only $1.69 a jug, right? Try and keep off the city water because it's not good. And they start thinking, oh, this guy's pretty cool because he's caring about me, And um, like this one girl, I was talking to her, I guess about 2 weeks ago about flat Earth, and she said, "No way." And I was telling her about the convex Earth video that came out on YouTube. I said, "We want to check that out." I didn't want to hear with anything, like Eric Dubé or anything serious. Just check out the convex Earth thing, right? I seen her the other day, and I told her I just came back from meeting Mark Sargent and Patricia Steer and Meg Mag and stuff down at Spin Ping Pong, and how the flat Earth thing was a really cool get together. And she started catching on to it, right? And she was going to go home and try and get her boyfriend to watch a video with her, right? So that's how I kind of start. My dog actually is the one who helped me introduce me to this girl because I tied him outside the store. I ran in, grabbed a pack of smokes. I was coming out. She was patting him on the head. She was coming out of the other store with her laundry. And then I just, she made a friend with her. And then eventually she's catching on to flat Earth just by my association through my dog, right?
Yep. Yeah, indeed.
Do you take your dog with you everywhere, John?
Yeah, actually, like because I live in a sort of a small town. It's like I live in the historic district of Sanford now. So it's like there's a store right around the corner, and there's actually a dog park right on my street, like a really nice big dog park. They even have a little dog park too, but she's good with the big dogs. And so yeah, like if I go walk to the store or something, I'll take her like in the store. Either one, there's a couple of stores. I'll take her in there if I walk to the store, whenever. So yeah. Yep. Oh, and yeah, people. It's much easier for someone dog lovers, right? They will approach you. It's much easier to sort of break the ice with a dog. I totally agree. Yeah.
Did people recognize you, John, by the way, when you're out? Because you've got, even if they, I don't know, well, I'd recognize you, but you've got such a distinctive voice. Do people recognize you?
No, I don't think so.
Oh.
I hope not.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding. No, I doubt it. You probably wouldn't recognize me.
Well,
oh yeah, you'd recognize my voice. Yeah, no, I've got a beard. Not because I want to, just because I'm lazy. No.
Have you? Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
A bit different to your photograph on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can shave it off. It's not a permanent thing, but
stage. Just wanted to say as well that there's a few comments in the chat room, Tommy, whether you're Rod Stewart or David Bowie.
I got both of those this week already when I was out and about. Right, I got asked if somebody said I looked totally like David Bowie on Tuesday, I think it was, and then yesterday somebody said I was Rod Stewart, and
I said to you today, you look a bit like the old Roadster.
There was a couple of guys stuck their head in one of these big 5-ton trucks the other day. I was
Booert
walking down Bay
Stowie.
Street. I was walking down Bay Street, and they said, "Hey, Rod Stewart." Right? I get that all the time. Do you play guitar? Yeah, I play guitar. But no, it's just
Actually, John plays guitar as well.
Yeah.
I got a Telecaster, a Les Paul.
Oh, that's a nice one.
Yeah.
Yep, I got a little piece of crap one that I got from Amazon. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that's actually down at the pawn shop though. I'm gonna have to get that bad boy out this week.
Oh yeah, I've done that before.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I got a Telecaster.
I've got one, but mine's a Spanish one. I prefer Western, but I like the Spanish. It's all right, just to play on.
Yeah. No, I got amps too. I got a Marshall stack, right? I got a 50-watt head, a 100-watt head, right? My brother's got about 5 guitars. He's got an Ernie Ball. I just paid $3,400 for that. He's got a drum. He's got a pro drum kit in his basement. He's got keyboards, a piano. We got it all. Like we used to have a band back in the day called Social Crisis, and we used to do a lot of old Who stuff, and we did some high schools. Like back in the day when I was going to high school, you know the band Rush and Max Webster used to play my high school every fall, right? And now they're like selling out to millions of crowds of stadiums and stuff, right? You know what I'm saying? And well, I know about Max Webster. They used to be Max Webster, and they became Kim Mitchell. But Rush has been they hit it big, right? And I used to go to we used to go to school with those guys on Avenue Road and stuff, right? They're just normal guys, but I don't know what they're like nowadays. I haven't seen them in 25 years or so.
Cosmic Cat says, "Get your guitars out, boys."
Yeah, I got a black Telecaster. It's 1978, right? And then I got a 1970 or so Les Paul, but that's kind of half taken apart right now. I took the paint off it. I was going to repaint it, but my brother's got a bunch of guitars. He's got a bunch of custom guitars. My brother's been playing since he was 7 years old, and I guess he's 53 now. And I started when I was about 14, and then I broke my left arm. I broke both my femurs, my left arm, my tibia, my pelvis in a motorcycle crash, and that kind of screwed me up a bit, right? And yeah, it was crazy. But yeah, back in the day, we used to play a lot of music and stuff. I still love it. I mean, it's hard because I know you know a lot of stuff about the music industry. My lawyer was a legal advisor for CPI, which was Concert Productions International. And back in the day, I was selling a lot of drugs and stuff. And I did some partying with people like Peter Gabriel and Billy Idol and Marianne Faithfull. And I went to some parties at the top of the TD Center after concerts with Peter Gabriel and stuff. And that was like the after concert parties. And there's a lot of crazy stuff going on at those parties and stuff. And I seen a lot of stuff back in my day, but I turned myself around. I guess when my ex-wife, she's an actress and a model, and she's pretty girl. She's a legal secretary when she's got no work on the side, but she's a cocaine addict from being in the film industry. And so when my daughter was 6 years old, basically the government took her away from her, and because I had already broken up with her, and placed her with me. So when I became a single parent with my daughter when she was 6 years old, it rocked my rock and roll world, and per se, and my active drug addiction life. And now I'm a grandfather with 2 kids, and I raised a good daughter, and now I got a 14-year-old son in Nova Scotia as well. And I'm in Toronto, but I mean, my daughter just moved back there now because she wanted to get away from the big city with her 2 kids. And so she's there now, and I know what you know, this whole this thing about being in life here in this world and being involved with all this crazy stuff. And to me, I worry about everybody else more than myself. You know, I gotta take care of my grandkids and my children, but then I also take care of like other people I buy iodine for people like that. If I'm working somewhere and I know some girls and stuff, see, iodine is another way to make friends with girls, because I tell them that the iodine that they used to get in 1979, see, the breast cancer thing is an iodine deficiency with the women, and it gets along with the ovaries and stuff, with the ovarian cysts and stuff. It's all got to do with the iodine deficiency. And when I started talking with women about health issues, and I tell them, look, they reduced the iodine in the bread in 1979 and took it out of the bread, and they reduced it in the salt to down to less than 2% in 1979. And by 1990, there was an outbreak of cancer, breast cancer and ovarian cysts and all this kind of shit going on with the women in North America and in Europe. And what had happened is because the iodine is absorbed by the thyroid gland, the INE element, right? The thyroid sends the iodine elements to the breast and to the women's reproductive systems to aid in the baby production and the breast milk production. When they took the iodine of the bread in 1979 and reduced it in the salt, it made the women that were iodine deficient, the thyroid is going to absorb the INE from the chlorine, and that goes to the breast, not the iodine from, or the INE from the iodine. It's the iodine from the chlorine, which they intentionally beefed it up in the drinking system so that the women would get the breast cancer, because the stuff turns to cystosis, and then it eventually turns cancer, because cancer is a fungal virus and it lives off of sugar. And so that's why everything is made out of sugar nowadays, because it's cancer food, right? And this is what they've done to women intentionally. And that's not even including what they actually they put them to work in the 1950s, but I'm not even going to get involved with that. But this is how I make friends. So when I take iodine into work sometimes, like I got a jug of it right here. It's a bottle of Lugos iodine, right? I don't know if you can see that. I take it, it's brand new. I take them in, I give them away to people like $17, right? I don't care if it's it. And then I make a friend with somebody. And then a couple weeks later, I'm talking to him, how's it going with the iodine? Oh, I'm really good. I think he gave me that. I tell him to watch Dr. Group on YouTube, iodine deficiency for women. I give him a bunch of videos to check out before I even give him the iodine. And then I give him the iodine as a gift and say, well, check it out. If you feel better about it, cool. A couple weeks later, I start hitting them with, some stuff about the drinking water. And then eventually, I did this with one person in particular, and I ended up giving her some books by Eric Dubé, and then I gave her, there's the Flat Earth Conspiracy, and then there was another one. I can't remember all the books I got here, but there's a couple books. I ended up giving out 2 books on Flat Earth to her, and I think she's actually getting it. I think she's a Flat Earther today, but she's a young girl, and she's going to be she was about to get married, and I was discussing with her about the straw man stuff as well. And about, when you're getting married and you're having a child, just make sure you check this stuff out first before you get involved with that birth certificate stuff. Because you know what, you're getting on ship citizen here. And anyway, but I make friends, and I try and do my best to share positive information in a healthy way. And then I try and also introduce them to the reality of the world that they live in. I mean, it's only fair to people to know where the frig they are. I mean, I didn't know for the longest while. I did know a long time ago, but I bucked the system for many years, right? But a lot of people out there are so blindsided by the education system, the television, the music, it's in the magazines and newspapers. My elevator, I just got a new elevator. So, but the last elevator I had in my apartment was made by Globe Elevator Company. Can you figure that one out? Every day I got in the elevator, I push the button, I see Globe. You know what? That's subliminal controlling me right there. I get on my elevator first thing in the morning. I just have my cup of coffee. I push go and I see Globe. You know what I mean? I walk out the door. Everybody's walking around with these globes in their hand, right? It's just like, oh, Molly, where am I? I'm in Disney World, and I just try and help people out. And I'll leave it up to you. Thanks.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I bet Google Earth loved it when that app first came out, didn't they?
Yeah.
I remember when it first came out, I was actually quite amazed by it, that I could, wow, man, you can zoom in and you can go, I went here once, well, let me see if I can find that old house I used to live in, that kind of thing. Yeah, but it's it's just there to distract us, isn't it? Keep us from finding out the truth. That's what I'm, It's too much. It is too much.
Yeah, but the people don't even want to hear it. It's like, you know, you're paradigm busting, right? Like I use
John,
my brothers and
do you agree with Tommy? Do you feel like that's for you, or do you keep it all on the internet, really? Mr. Morgile's not there.
Oh, no, sorry, I was on
you are
mute.
there.
No, like, you know, it's not something that I'll just come out and talk to every single person in my life about. No, but if the opportunity presents itself, sure, I'll bring it up. It's just there's just so many taboos, and like most of my interactions would be in terms of work related, and it's just something that I've learned to not necessarily be
What does your
very.
mum think about it then?
What's that?
What does your mum think about it with you?
Her position on it is that it doesn't affect her life, so it doesn't really matter to her. She doesn't want to hear about it either way, and she probably leans more towards the globe, but you know, she doesn't I guess she doesn't really get the arguments. She was never very interested in it. And so yeah, that's sort of her thing.
Well, thing is,
Yeah.
we've gone down the rabbit hole now, haven't we? And it's so huge, and there's just so many parts of it now. I mean, you're writing a book, aren't you, as well? How's your book going?
Well, I finished it, and I had some issues with my external hard drive, and accidentally saved it on there. I've still got it. Something like 40 or 50 pages was not saved, but I've still, yeah, I put out the first section in audiobook format on my channel, and I attempted to do the second section live streaming from my phone. That didn't work, so I'm going to redo the second section on my main channel as a video and just keep doing it section by section as a audiobook. Yeah.
Thanks for that. And also, are you back streaming on your main channel now?
No, I can't. I cannot stream on my main channel. I've still got 2 community guideline strikes until I want to say, I forget when it started, but it's 3 months from whenever it started, and that was probably at least a month ago.
That's still going. Oh, it's forever, isn't it? Feels like forever when it's you on a strike or whatever.
Yeah. Yep. It sure. Yeah, it sucks. And it was for videos I had put out years ago, a long time ago. They went back and found one video that I did on the event that shall not be named in Boston, and it wasn't. It was from stuff that I had gotten off of other YouTube videos. That was where I got the content for the video, and just had some commentary on it. And I had done 2 such videos. I got a community guideline strike on one. So when I did the appeal, the process for the appeal, you can put like 1 sentence. It's like less than 100 characters or something. There's no way you can write a coherent appeal in 1 sentence. And so when I saw that, the thought occurred to me, well, maybe I should pull down my other Boston video from a long time ago, because whatever, it's not that big of a deal. And so I pulled it, and then the next day I got a community guideline strike on the video I had just pulled. And so when I went to try to appeal that, the appeal link is part of the video from your user interface. And so without that, since I had deleted the video, there was nowhere to go to do the appeal. It was like a 404 server error. The page didn't exist. And so and I lost the first appeal anyway. Basically, YouTube decided at some point certain topics that they were just pretty much going to blanket censor, unless it's like a mainstream voice covering the topic, of course, with the mainstream narrative. But all these other channels, and we've seen a lot of them, we talked to Russian Vids a few weeks ago. His channel got taken down completely, and mine nearly got taken down. A lot of channels nearly got taken down, or were indeed taken down because of stuff they had done in the past.
Even Pro777 got taken down, but luckily he got his back up again.
Oh yeah, yeah, yep. And so they're just censoring everybody, and we, you know, it can be argued that it's their platform, and so we don't really have any rights to it. You know, it's their intellectual property, and they've made all the investments in it and whatever, so they own it, and we're just users on their system. And if we don't like it, we can go somewhere else. But frankly, you know, YouTube and Google have certainly a corporate monopoly. There is no other platform that's even close to the
Yeah, they
monopoly of
probably made
YouTube.
sure of that, though, didn't they?
Yeah. So there really is. It's just like with the electric company. They can pretty much treat you however they want. They can do whatever they want. And if you don't like it, well, especially with the electric company, it's not like you can opt to go buy your electricity from someone else, at least not around here. You have to buy it from that one company, and so they can treat you however they like. And that's the problem with a monopoly. And I guess, it could be argued that there are opportunities for other companies to compete with YouTube, but it's not going to happen anytime soon until people move away from YouTube. That's the only thing that's going to make that happen, and it's just a hard thing to do. But at some point, you do see it happen, where these big, super well-performing, at least in theory or at least in the stock markets, well-performing internet companies that end up getting replaced by something bigger and better, and people forget all about the first one. So that may also happen as well, but I don't know. Who can really say?
Can I just say, I hate to end great chats, but we've been going sort of for over 3 hours now. 3 hours is quite a good time. I know that you haven't quite been with us that long, Jon, but yeah, I think it's probably time we sort of round up a bit. Anything that you're going to be doing, Jon? Topics on Globebusters?
Yeah, I got some stuff, videos I'm working on. It takes some time, but I've got a few things that I'm working on, and at least conceptually and researching for. Globebuster Sunday. It's always a surprise. I don't even know what we're going to talk about until Sunday, so you'll just have to tune in and see. I just put out a video a couple days ago on the Morgile channel. Check that out. It's what is it called? Oh yeah, it's called Flat Earth. All roads lead to the globe. Yep.
Thank you for that, Jon. Tommy, are you going to any more meets or anything? Any more on Giants?
Not well, as soon as I find out if there's anything to be in my vicinity, I not that I know of. If there's something coming up in Toronto, I'm definitely going to be there. I might even talk to Mark or something and maybe set something up, maybe start something on my own here, right? I mean, I live in a pretty cool neighborhood. It's like, it's pretty yuppie. I mean, a lot of people are pretty young and stuff. And, I mean, I live in a nice apartment building, and so I could probably find a place where I could get a little meetup going on. I mean, the one I went to at Chow Chow's, there's only 6 people there. And then when I met Mark and Patricia at Spin Ping Pong, there's about 20 people there. So, I mean, if I can probably, I might even start doing something like a local here, because I think it's time something happens. This is a big city, right? And there's a lot going on here. This is like Hollywood North, right? And a lot of it's, they got the TIFF going on here, which is when Mark and Patricia came here. They came to see the Toronto International Film Festival. So maybe I'll talk to Patricia or Mark and see what I can do about getting them to, maybe put on something, and I can set something up to make a meet going on here. And that's about all I can do right now. But I'm also trying to get prepared for my son's summer visit with me. So I got a 14-year-old son that's going to be coming to spend 2 months with me. So I also got he's catching on the flat earth too, by the way. Right?
It's really great, Tommy. I'm really happy for you that you're looking forward to that.
The thing is, I gotta tell him to watch himself, because I was working at Red Lobster for six months, and it was just a kitchen job, and I was talking to people about the voting system here in Canada at work, right? And because it was right around the time they were having a vote for that little Trudeau, Justin Trudeau, and at the same time I was talking some truth, and I brought in a couple of books and I give it to one of the girls there that was interested in the flat Earth. So I give her a couple of flat Earth books, right? And she caught on to it, pretty cool. And then next thing you know, the kitchen boss, she was right all over me one day, right? And so I said, "Hey, look, woman, I bust my ass off here." I said, "I've never been late. I'm in early. I'm picking up extra shifts. I'm always the last guy out of Dodge here. Like, what am I doing wrong?" I said to her, "Get off my ass, will you?" I didn't even say it. No, I didn't use no profanity or nothing. I kind of, then the other kitchen boss told me to go for a smoke. So I took off for a smoke, came back, finished my shift. The next day I came in, the boss suspended me for the chief boss, the GM. He suspended me for 2 days with pay. So then I went back on Thursday and he said, "Oh, Tommy, this has gone to head office." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "All I did was tell her to get off my ass." I said, "Look, Davey, I didn't even tell her to get the frig off my ass." You know what I'm saying? He said, No, this has gone to head office. She's been here for 20 years and she's really making a big stink out of this. I ended up being suspended with pay for 3 months with full pay. And I was only there for 6 months. But I was talking truth at this job, Red Lobsters is an Illuminati Corp. I'm sure you all know that, right? And I was talking truth there and I was talking flat earth and I got suspended for 3 months. And then after 90 days, Davey had to let me go and I lost that job. And that's what happens when you got to be a truther. So when you're talking to kids and you're telling them, like my son, I said, "Look, you're catching on to things, but you got to watch it because when you go into school, not all these kids you're going to school with are going to be flat earth kids. And plus, you're going to watch these parents and teachers and stuff because they're going to end up, they could cause you some problems." So he's keeping it on the DL, right? But like I said, I myself went through an experience being just sharing flat earth and giving out a couple of books and pointing out to people that NASA in Hebrew means deception, right? You think that sun's 98 million miles away, yet it's just on the other side of the clouds? So be it, right?
Yeah, we get ostracized, Tommy, don't we?
Well,
Anyway,
job,
it's been really great chatting and everything. Thank you for that, Tommy. I'm sorry to hear some things. That's not good. But Astral, do you want to say anything before we can?
I just want to say, thank you to Tommy. Thank you to Jon The Morgile, Patricia. We've not really heard from Patricia. I hope she's okay. And you too, Karen. It's been great.
Yeah, well, I'd like to say thank you very much to Tommy, you, Astral,
and to the chat room,
and Jon The Morgile, and the chat room, of course. We're back on Monday. But anyway, mwah, to everybody on the panel, mwah, to everybody in the chat.
Bye, guys.
And yeah, can we say goodbye off air, Jon The Morgile? Just say goodbye off air. Anyway, bye to everybody in the chat room. Thanks for watching.